Hello, everyone. My name is Simon Bogdanovich. I am the Chief Business Development Officer at Liquiditi Solutions. I'm here based in sunny Los Angeles, California. I want to thank everyone for being on with us here today. So giving you a quick background on Liquiditi Solutions. Really, the company is founded to help combat COVID-19 and offer critical support to governments and private enterprises by really streamlining the process of acquiring life-saving medical supplies and equipment. And we've developed through our suppliers and manufacturers integrated testing, tracking, and health passport, digital health solutions so that governments as well as businesses can reopen their economies in a safe and a secure way. So our mission as Liquiditi Solutions is to protect humanity from the catastrophic events of the pandemic with safety equipment, testing, and solutions that span the globe. Thank you. And now I will pass it off to Alice, who will get us into the first session of the forum. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alice Litkova and I'm your co-host today. I would like to first and foremost thank Liquiditi Solutions and Unit Ventures for inviting me today. A little bit about me is I'm an author, journalist, and a spokesperson for fintech companies. As a media personality, I have launched a show called New Economies at NASDAQ and the London Stock Exchange for the purposes to advocate for more women in technology and specifically blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies. A lot of the people in the industry have pivoted to the healthcare sector, specifically looking at solving the supply chain issues. It's really great to see someone like Simon from the fintech industry and I co-hosting now this event and pivoting into the healthcare space. I'm based in California and I travel across Europe and the United States. So I would like, with that being said, I would like to introduce to you the first panel, which is called Present and Future of COVID-19 Testing, Treatment, and Prevention. In this session, you will hear from medical doctors and researchers who are leading COVID-19 initiatives. John, who will be your moderator, will lead this panel. John?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this first session of today's forum, which aims to give you more of a medical and a scientific perspective on COVID-19 and the pandemic. So my name is John Leon, and I'm coming to you today from Boston, Massachusetts as your moderator. I myself am a medical researcher at Harvard University with a background in infectious disease research. And in my past research, I've been certified to work with airborne pathogens in a biosafety level containment setting. And I've also been involved in the development of novel vaccines. I'm joined today by three panelists, Dr. Dara Kass from New York City, Dr. Chenwei Wu from Seattle, Washington, and Dr. Bridget Queenan from Cambridge, Massachusetts. So if I may, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves. And if we could, let's start with Dr. Kass.
Oh, hi. My name is Dr. Dara Kass. I am an emergency medicine doctor in New York City at Columbia University Medical Center. I also am a person who had coronavirus. Some people use the term survivor, but I think I'm just recovering. I had it early on in March, where I recovered in about a week and a half at home. So I think we'll talk about that a lot. And I've been advocating for kind of widespread testing and tracking since the beginning and communicating straight to the public, mostly related to the lack of federal leadership on testing, tracking, and PPE procurement. So I think that this is going to come up a lot over the next half
hour. Let's go Dr. Queenan next, please.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Dr. Bridget Queenan. I currently run a biology research center at Harvard in Boston and have spent the last 20 years in and around various aspects of biological science, engineering, and technology, making drugs, devices, educational materials, building research centers, and I'm currently involved in a few efforts to get those COVID test kits made and distributed, as we've been hearing so much about.
And Dr. Wu.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So I'm Chen Wu. I graduated from Harvard as an undergrad, went to Duke for med school, and then graduated residency here at the University of Washington. I'm currently an internist working as an inpatient doctor in the Seattle area. I'll leave the affiliation kind of out of it, so just here as a private citizen, but have not caught COVID, have taken care of a couple of COVID patients, and just recently we did look over our case records for the hospital, so should have some background there.
Yeah, so thank you all for being here today. And before we begin, I just wanted to make clear to our audience that what you hear in this session are the opinions of the panelists themselves, and our views don't represent the institutions that we work for or belong to, so please keep that in mind. And also during this conversation, if there are any questions that you have, please feel free to type them in the chat box or to message me directly, and we'll try to address them if possible. So yeah, let's get this show on the road. If I may, I'll start with Dr. Wu. So you're based in Seattle, Washington, and Washington State was the first state in the United States to report cases of COVID-19. So could you share with us what that initial response in the state was like, and what are some of your personal experiences from treating COVID patients during that time, and how are things going now?
Yeah, sure. So, so interestingly, I was actually in Chile when all this blew up. So left at the end of February for the last vacation in a while, and was down there and kind of just scrolling through the news, and that's when the Life Center skilled nursing home cases erupted. So left, everything was normal. We were saying that this is not here, even though we had that case up in Everett originally. Went back and kind of was very hyper vigilant about anyone coughing on the airplane on the way back. And got there, and the whole hospital had been reconfigured. So entrances closed off, flow metered, that sort of thing, testing in place to the extent that they could. So there was a lot of physical plant changes that was there. And kind of from that point on, it was sort of getting trained in personal protective equipment use, which there are fits and starts to that. But I think that did ultimately get smoothed out. And then waiting for this surge, because Seattle, we were kind of in the lead going up that curve. So interestingly enough, as the cases were hitting around the city, mostly in the suburbs, we were just waiting for it to hit our hospital. And that actually never happened. So it stayed mostly in different hotspots around the city. So again, very geographically isolated pockets of intensity. So we were watching that hospital resource prediction, the IHME forecast from the University of Washington and that group. And April 15th or something was our predicted peak day, and we were just getting ready for that surge. And I was on service during that time and took care of one or two COVID patients, but really the surge didn't happen. A lot of folks just stayed home. So it was a very bizarre situation where you're expecting a lot of anxiety, and then the exact opposite happens. That's, again, my personal experience. I know that is like completely different in other places, but I think that just highlights how geographically, how much heterogeneity there is. Even in the city of Seattle, the downtown core was largely spared, and then it was Renton and the suburbs that really got the majority of cases. I will say, though, that I think the reason that we ducked a lot is the fear of that.
I didn't see you. I thought you were parked there. Okay, go. All right, I'm gonna go.
Was that the fear of that first nursing home? And so I think that got the community really red alert. And the consequence of that was that people were and are still a lot more vigilant. So this city has not had a problem with face masking. I go out to the grocery store and pretty much everyone is masked. And certainly if you're not wearing a mask or forget it or something, you definitely feel like there's this social expectation that you should be wearing it. And I think that's protective.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. And so Dr. Cass, I want to come to you next because you're based in New York. And so we've seen New York City become the epicenter and the focus of the pandemic here in the United States. So can you tell us what it's been like working in New York City during this time? And what do you think the city how is it doing now in terms of providing care to patients?
So I think that New York City has been a really good example of what can happen when the people's will really does reflect the data and the science. After Seattle saw its hotspot and we saw nursing homes get overwhelmed, we kind of watched it happen on the West Coast for about a couple of days. We thought we had more time, and actually we didn't. And then we saw the travel, the international travel that was coming into New York airports was really what triggered our cases. We just didn't know it at the time, and we we very quickly, at least as quickly as you can get a whole city of 11 million people and 19 million in the state to act, got to a real database approach, which included mask wearing, getting our PPE up, really kind of increasing our vigilance around data and science. And actually the daily press briefings from our governor, I think, was really helpful for people to see both the increase in number of cases and how testing was effective, and then the decrease in the number of cases and how the work of the New Yorkers was really reflected in the health of New York City. And we really also realized the vulnerable populations of New York City, whether it was intergenerational homes or low-income people or communities of color, really having a disproportionate impact of this virus, which allowed us then to increase and focus testing in those communities as well. So in the middle of all of it, like I said, I got sick amongst almost like a lot of people that I knew. And we really learned quickly how to take care of people with the virus at home. We increased our capacity for telemedicine. We increased our capacity for testing and tracking, trying very hard to catch up with the need that was out there. And I think that now that we're on the downswing in New York City and we're opening, even we opened other states and other counties in our state before New York City itself. Now we're dealing with the other side of this, which is if we are going to have a data-based approach to this virus, and if we're going to continue to open and close as a response to the, infectability of the R naught of the virus or the number of hospitalizations or ICU or anything else, how do we interact with other states that are not doing that? Right? What do we do with states that are not having the capacity to test, that are seeing a 20% positive rate, like they're seeing right now in Arizona for their testing right now? And what does it mean? And as we open in New York City, really high volume experiences like the subway system or our public school system or our airports, how do we get ahead of finding the virus as new people come in? And that's, I think, why as early as today, the governors of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut put in a quarantine of 14 days for people traveling from hotspot states, because it's the first indication of us having to protect ourselves from the lack of, honestly, state and local leadership in other states that are not conforming to science the same way we are here.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. And Dr. Queenan, I wanted to spotlight you as well. So you've been involved in the Boston area with companies in developing COVID test kits. And so could you tell us about that experience from a scientific point of view and what it's been like and what kind of challenges have come up in the course of that work?
Yeah, so it's been interesting. I have come at this from both a scientific and a personal perspective. I had been down in New York in February when things were starting to explode, and had come back to Boston from New York's Chinatown with a really bad respiratory infection. And I was like, okay, don't be racist, but like, this is not great. And I had actually called up one of my friends because they're working, the company that she founded is working on making at-home molecular test kits to be like, is this flu? Is this RSV? What have you got? And I was like, can I get one of those? Because it would be really helpful right now. But we just started talking and was like, okay, we should add COVID in there, right? It would be great if people could have the peace of mind of, I'm sick, I've got a respiratory infection. It's manageable right now, but, which one of these is it? And so started going from there and started, getting the data, filing the protocols, getting some of the grants. But then one of the things that's been really interesting about the process is, and I think that, this forum will be talking more about it, but people have really recognized in light of this pandemic that just the way we manufacture things has to fundamentally change, right? That some of these aspects of the global supply chain just are not going to be capable of handling pandemics and kind of climate-based disasters. So it's actually been, I think, a really exciting time where the culture has changed a little bit, that in industry, people recognize it's like, okay, if we're trying to make these molecular test kits, let's just make a bunch of different ones based on fundamentally different strategies, right? And the same thing with the vaccines, like, let's just kind of diversify and then see which one works. And I think that that's actually been really healthy, is to say, A, we don't know which of these is going to work first and which is going to work best. And B, we just don't want a bottleneck of every single one of these test kits or every single one of these vaccines requiring the same reagent that's produced in the one factory in the one place. So I am actually pretty excited about whether this, kind of changes some of the attitudes, within medicine and science and technology, to say, like, it's actually great that we're kind of dividing and conquering in some of these spaces, and that some of these test kits and some of these vaccines actually could be appropriate for different audiences. So it isn't like, oh, here's the right answer and here's the wrong answer. Like, let's just get as many answers into the right context as possible.
Yep. So thank you for that. It's really good to hear about some of your personal experiences in your respective cities. So I kind of just wanted to open up now in terms of some basic information about COVID-19. So let's start with, we've heard continuing debate that COVID-19 is similar to the flu in terms of morbidity and mortality. And I think that opinion is starting to change. But I think to the general public, in your experiences, how would you compare COVID-19 to the flu, and what differences have you seen, especially in treating patients during this time? So, let's start with Dr. Cass.
Yeah, it's not the flu. This is like, I'm just going to stop that. Like, this is the analogy of the flu was put out there by people that wanted to minimize the risk because the flu is something people are comfortable with. The flu has vaccines, it's not a vaccine, right? The flu has a mortality rate that's related to, the seasonality of it, and we know a lot about how to treat it. And it's, people kind of wrap their hearts around the idea that if it was not as bad as the flu, we could be okay. It was really a comfort mechanism around people that didn't understand what we're dealing with. And it is a virus, then the flu is a virus, and that's about when you can stop. There's a lot of other viruses out there. Okay, there are muscle aches and fatigue in both of these viruses. There are muscle aches and fatigues in a lot of viruses. And then I think the other thing that I want to unpack about the flu is that a lot of conversation about this second wave in the fall that I think people are worried about, and that's why that's the only other time the flu comes up. The coronavirus itself, like the symptoms that it presents with, are non-specific, and that's a lot of the testing issue we've had. So it's malaise, fatigue, you can lose your taste, you can be short of breath, you can have a cough, you can have a headache. Some people get nauseous and vomiting, and then obviously there's the effects on children after the fact, when in this undefined period of time they have a multi-system inflammatory condition that affects a lot of their blood vessels and their hearts and other issues. The end stage of the coronavirus for adults usually happens a lot, another inflammatory condition where they have difficulty breathing, they have heart, kidney issues, a lot of other multi-system inflammatory issues as well. We need to find the virus when people are well at home, and certainly before they get so sick that you kind of hit beyond the pendulum spot to make them better. A lot of the treatments we focused on is this hospitalization and critically ill aspect. A lot of the remdesivir and a lot of the hydroxychloroquine and a lot of these hospitalization trials have been on these very critically ill patients. But the truth is 85 to 90% of patients will not even ever go to a hospital with this virus. And so we need to figure out who they are early. We need to treat them aggressively. We need to keep them from the hospitalization, not just from a resource perspective, from a public health perspective, because once you get that sick that you need hospitalization, we actually don't know the long-term consequences of this virus on bodies. I think that and I think Bridget as well can explain the effects you have when you have this virus after the fact. I still have shortness of breath and chest pain, and I had a mild case of the disease. This is a virus that stays with you for a period of time afterwards. The flu doesn't do that. The last thing I will say is that in the fall, when we go back inside and we're still dealing with potentially the first wave, right? We're still in the first wave. We haven't gotten it at bay. We haven't gotten it down anywhere, except for maybe New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. We will have to figure out when patients come to the ER or call their doctors with a respiratory symptom and viral illness and a fever, whether or not they have the coronavirus, because it affects their mandatory quarantine and isolation, or else we're going to be isolating everybody back again. Right? And so that's why we need rapid testing to understand. But the conversation about the flu is not that the virus acts like the flu, it's that they're both viruses, and that in the fall, we are gonna have to figure out very quickly if somebody has the coronavirus, influenza, or something else. Right. Fair enough? Sorry, that's my soapbox.
That's great. Very, very, very strong perspective, and I love it. So let's follow up with that, Dr. I wanted to ask you to respond to this. So, like what Dr. Cass was just saying, in terms of seeing a second wave, we're now in summertime, and especially with states and cities going through phase reopenings right now. What are some of the expectations that you might have for the summer? Do you predict that there will be a second wave come the fall? And what kind of advice would you give to people about how they should take precautions during the summertime?
Yeah, I think that first and second wave distinction, right? It seems like the first wave is blending into that second wave. We've all seen the curves. Maybe a place, and this getting into immunity and some of the comparisons to influenza or the next topic, which may be vaccines, is that the places who had it very severely, so a lot of folks have that herd immunity. So folks like New York City is probably one of the better spots to be, as things are progressing, because if you can compare this to a wildfire, it kind of burned out all the fuel in that tightly packed, densely populated space. And so the curve in New York is fairly flat. I think the CNN tracker was saying doubling rate every year or something like that. Whereas places that actually were successful at the beginning of this, in terms of flattening the curve, they've slowed the rate of transmission. So they've decreased the steepness of that slope, but it may not ultimately change the area under the curve in terms of the total number of folks who are going to get affected. Now, that has actually met the objective of taking the pressure off the healthcare system. So places like California, you're seeing that steady rise. It's the most populous state in the union. And it's headed back up to its rightful place in all of this. So yeah, so there is that. Is it going to come back? Has it even disappeared? I don't know. I'm treating this as maybe an eye in the storm and loading up on toilet paper and getting a haircut before things turn south again. But I am definitely concerned that things are going to get worse in the fall, just like with every respiratory virus. So we take past as prologue, then that's likely what is going to happen. And I am more concerned now than I was 2 weeks ago, looking at that curve already starting to bend upward. And just, I think getting back to what Dr. Cass was saying, this is a brand new pathogen that we're trying to learn what it does to the body. So I think a lot of the flu, the way that I picture it is it's the virus doing its thing. This, I think, has a lot of host factors involved. So that hyperinflammation, where a person will come in day 10 of their symptoms and just crump. So Boris Johnson was taken to hospital around day 10. We have actually admitted someone who was perfectly fine on day 10 because of concern that that's when that hyperinflammatory stage is going to take off. So, and then the clotting that happens, the multiple PEs and strokes, and this Kawasaki syndrome in children. There's so many things that this is way beyond influenza, and no one is immune, except maybe now a lot of New York. So that's kind of the situation.
Yeah, Dr. Cass.
Yeah, New York isn't immune. I want to be really clear about that. I want to be really clear that we're nowhere near herd immunity in New York City. By best efforts, we may be hitting 20% infiltration in the highest density areas of New York. There are other areas of rural New York that probably have numbers between 5 and 8%. We have to get to 70% to even remotely hit herd immunity. So the reason that the virus is at bay at New York very much has to do with the actions of New Yorkers, mask wearing and social distancing. Yes, it's true the fire is lower because there is less virus probably spreading in the air, and so people, even when they're in close contact, aren't at high risk. But like the idea of herd immunity, we'd have to lose hundreds of millions of Americans to this virus to get anywhere near natural immunity. And we still don't even know if the antibodies that I have are going to stay long enough to give me any sustained immunity in the pack. So I want to be clear that New York City is as at risk of getting this virus back as anywhere else in America. And that's something we make sure people understand when we open and tell people when they have to come back home. What's happening in Arizona and Florida is not an accident. It was entirely predictable, and it can happen anywhere else in America. And it will continue to happen even in states like Montana and Idaho, which have had hardly any cases from the very beginning. This is a lesson we need to learn from everybody. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. And so just sort of coming off of what both of you have been saying in terms of, you know, getting this kind of information and understanding the truth about the virus and also about the disease. So I wonder, Dr. Queenan, from kind of a scientific perspective, you know, one of, I think, the challenges during this time is that data being published or pre-printed and being generated in the news about COVID and the coronavirus has just been so substantial that I think even for myself and my colleagues, it's been really difficult to figure out what data, what pieces are accurate and which, you know, pieces of advice we should follow. Do you have any advice about how to keep up with scientific progress? Anything that you do to sort of sift out the accurate information? And what tips might you have for the general public about how they can sort of navigate through all the information that we're bombarded by on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it is to express sympathy. It is a full-time job to keep track of this, right? I mean, it is just an onslaught of, which vaccine and which mechanism and which thing and which test case and whatever. I mean, so it's like, if you're overwhelmed by it, that's fine. I guess the thing that I would adopt is, I wouldn't end every speech with, and Carthage must be destroyed, but this kind of idea of, yes, there's things that are evolving, but there are things that are not evolving, right? Like, this is a virus, it is dangerous, we do not have it under control, right? Lots of people who do not have symptoms and will never have symptoms have this. Wear a mask, stay home, wash your hands. I mean, none of those things have changed. Like, we are still in the rising phase of a deadly pandemic. There's no indication that it's going to get better. And there are just some basic public health precautions that we can take in the meantime. And then to just say, we're working on it. Science is working on the test kits, it's working on the vaccines. You'll be the first to know if we have one at the, like, they're gonna wanna sell them to you. Like, the second that they're ready to go, you're gonna hear about it, right? But so it's just, I think the good news is people are pursuing a diversity of strategies for these different technologies, for these different vaccines, but those are not going to be magic bullets, right? Especially in this country. I mean, great, we have a vaccine, half the people aren't gonna get it, right? So it's like the vaccine isn't gonna solve the problem. I mean, so I think that we can focus on the fact that, researchers, doctors are doing what they can, but every individual member of the society can also contribute.
Okay, now let's move along to session 2, which is titled The Fast-Paced World of PPE Supply Chain and Logistics. So here we will hear from supply chain leaders and factory operators who will share insights on PPE testing kits and compliance issues. So your moderator today will be Wen, who is the co-founder of Liquiditi Solutions. Wen, please kick off the panel.
Thank you, Alice. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this COVID forum. As Alice mentioned, I'm here to introduce some of these great speakers here, specifically about PPE and the supply chain. I'd like to first preface with what we hope to achieve in this session. which is that it's obvious that PPE-related supply chains are overwhelmed due to the surge in demand of COVID-19. Obviously, we've seen this all over the news, all over the world. It's very, very pervasive. However, there's so much that goes into the manufacturing of a product and getting it from point A to point B. And along that entire chain, there are obviously complications that can be encountered and risks to stakeholders. So hopefully the session will shed some light on that supply chain. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce these three wonderful speakers. We have Patrick Carico, James Shea, and Sultan. I will let them each actually do a very quick introduction of themselves, and then we can get right into some of the questions I'm sure people are eager to hear about. So let's start with Patrick. Okay, I think.
Hello?
Yes, you are in and out, muted again. Okay.
Better now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. No problem. All right, I'm Patrick Calico, who's the business intelligence analyst for Adventist Health. Adventist Health has 26 hospitals, and they're in the top 10% of the United States. So in my position, I analyzed all the data, clinical, logistical, and billing data to come up with a picture and present a solution. I was also on the logistics team because it was going to a Costco-like buying system where one supplier acted as a middleman for all the rest of the suppliers. We had to vet out, because the process of vetting suppliers was very difficult at a local level. They were trying to contain costs by one company basically doing all the vetting for us. It had its advantages in terms of cost, but in terms of how we use product, it was very difficult and slow. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately.
You're muted.
Oh, am I still muted?
No, when.
Oh, when you're muted.
Okay, wasn't able to unmute there for a second. Thank you, Patrick.
Sure.
So James, please, quick intro. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, good day, and good morning to everyone who's joined today. My name is James Shea, and I'm founder and operator of Gushing Consulting. We're a manufacturing supply consulting group based in the United States with staff throughout Asia. What we primarily do is we service the Silicon Valley startups, other product-based development firms, and we support them in the commercialization of their products. We first review the manufacturability of their designs, and then when appropriate, pair with them and design supply chains and do strategic sourcing for these clients and help them scale up their products as they go through Series A and Series A investment, and then large-scale manufacturing and introduction into the markets. Specifically for COVID-19 PPE, I've been assisting Wen and the Liquiditi team in performing strategic sourcing and validating suppliers all throughout Asia, primarily within China for a number of the components that we are looking at.
Thank you, James. Oz, please.
Sure. I wear two hats. I work with Radiology Solutions Incorporated, which is a 23-year-old importer of radiology, nuclear imaging, and PPE equipment. And so with the move into, the COVID era, we've ramped up quite a bit. And I'm also part of the enterprise engineering team over at Radiologics. And so Radiologics is it's 5 years in development, and we've basically recently deployed a blockchain solution for PPE that can go from manufacturer all the way to user. What this allows us to do is to track not just efficacy as well as costing, but go and validate, exact steps inside of the supply chains. And we've seen a tremendous amount of fraud over the past, a couple months. Excited to talk about that, but I'll just give you a number. Florida paid $600 million for product that never showed up. And these types of risks are now affecting every single hospital in America. So the more that we can do to securitize these things, I think the happier we'll all be.
Thank you, Oz. Actually, since you've brought that up, why don't actually we let you take the floor on that, because I know you're doing some fascinating work utilizing blockchain as well on compliance and fraud prevention, which is obviously very relevant to COVID-related PPE. What are some red flags to take note of to avoid falling into some possible fraudulent transactions?
There's a lot of them. I mean, it depends how you're buying. So if you're the hospitals, what you want to do is you want to start validating some of the brokers and the broker networks that are coming to you, because what's happening in many cases is you could have a product. I'll give you an example. Say a box of gloves coming into the United States after the cost of shipping. So your FOB cost, which means like your cost in Vietnam or Thailand or Malaysia or somewhere else, might be like $7. There's obviously some margin that's going to be built into that, and then it depends how fast you want to get it here. Do you want to get it here by a plane? Do you want to get it here by a boat? And there's multiple boat options. Getting it here by a boat's pretty cheap. But when you start looking at things that have higher landed prices, what you want to make sure, number one, is that there's not too many brokers inside of that chain. Two is that you need to be doing at least DUNS checks and some basic background checks to make sure that the people that you're doing business with are legitimate. In many cases, what we found is that there were companies that hadn't been registered in years, companies that weren't operating, brokers, brokers that were presenting fraudulent goods. And that, I think, is the most catastrophic, because in many cases, you have hospitals where you have executives on the phone almost crying because what we find out is that a lot didn't exist. And so what we're trying to do with the Radiologics product and blockchain is basically start integrating from the factory forward and then into some of the secondary ecosystems, because we also see that there's going to be utility in larger hospitals selling smaller hospitals and creating some of these supply chain systems that currently kind of, work in sort of a de facto way. And then beyond that, basic certifications. Is what you're buying, are the FDA certifications up to date? If it's CE, or the CE certifications up to date? If this was imported, were the duties paid on these things? And you can ask for all of this stuff. But I think that the challenge is that most large healthcare systems that are doing procurement, and now states that are doing procurement, they're just trying to get whatever they can get. The state of New York, for example, and the state of Texas, it's cash and carry. So if you show up with 1 million masks and the masks pass, you're getting paid potentially $2 to $3 a mask in cash 3 hours later. And that's in New York. In Texas, they write you a check. But those are considerations to keep in mind, because it's become a very high profit margin, high volume industry very quickly. And there's just a lot of onerous pitfalls to look out for.
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, that's you touched upon a lot of things there. And obviously, I think this conversation, we're going to realize, anyone that's listening in, going to realize there's a lot to unpack in everything, in every sentence, because there's so much going on in this world, and this happens so quickly. And really, in just the last 3 months alone, you've seen, well, let's say 4 months. I mean, it's an entirely new annex to an industry, right? And many people are involved, many who are actually trying to do good things, but many who are also not. But, you did touch upon something about compliance. James, you really are one of the most seasoned sourcing supply chain experts that, I've had the privilege to glean insights from. And I know that we've had discussions about, manufacturing and understanding what it takes to create PPE. And we know that it isn't particularly complicated to make. So why is it so difficult for compliant goods to be manufactured?
Thank you for the question, Wayne. Yeah, like masks, gloves, and other barrier garments, they're not particularly difficult to make. The processes are pretty well known and established. Much of it is automated, especially on the mask and glove side. So we have a question or an issue with the availability of the core elements of manufacturing, manpower, the availability of material, the availability of capital machinery, and then the given amount of time. With the outbreak, the demand for product has vastly increased. It's tens, hundreds of times higher than what existing manufacturing was capable of performing. As we had discussed on a number of occasions, like one of the infrared thermometer manufacturers that we've been speaking with, prior to the outbreak, their annual capacity was at most 250, 500,000 units annually. They weren't really pushing all that much. But with a check with them over the last week, they're now producing over 1 million units per week. That's a dramatic increase in the capacity and scope of their operations. Not only do these companies need to find the actual factory floor spaces or the buildings to perform the work in, they need to find and identify and qualify and train the personnel to operate in those facilities. Last, the availability of the materials has been a big bottleneck, specifically for the non-woven fabrics. In the past few months in China alone, like Sinopec and a few of the other manufacturers have created from scratch and built non-woven melt-blown manufacturing lines. Normally, it's recognized that these lines take about 4 to 6 months to place on order, construct the machinery, and then run through qualification processes. Generally, after machines come online, there are a preliminary engineering qualification, and then the additional pre-pilot validation runs. And then finally, once the lines are qualified, then they're ready to prove out and run one lot after another. Some of these manufacturers have brought on these raw material manufacturing lines in as little as 18 or 20 days. So you can expect a lot of variability and variance on the quality of the goods that come out. So in many cases, we're having trouble with a garbage in and garbage out scenario where while product is being produced, the core material for masks and for garments is being produced. However, it's difficult to validate and check the quality of these goods. Both the manufacturers themselves have a shortage of test equipment. The downstream manufacturing chain, those companies that have set up to produce these masks and using automation to boost manufacturing, they don't have the ability to review and examine and adjudicate the quality of the goods that come in. Over the past few months, or more recently, as companies have become more established in these spaces, and the test equipment manufacturers have actually caught up with the orders, we're seeing gradually that the quality of the goods are improving. However, with that, now there are thousands and thousands of manufacturers available, specifically within China. And how do you cull through all of those organizations to figure out to separate the wheat from the chaff here? We've seen numerous cases where goods are delivered both to Europe and also to the United States, while on the outward appearance, they look perfectly fine. Their fit or their filtering efficiency just hasn't been up to snuff, and it's led to some embarrassing rejections and several political hot potatoes for the governments over here. In response to that, countries have the regulatory agencies have instituted a number of guidance, both for limiting the availability or the qualification of products that are accepted within the country. The FDA has several whitelists for goods for both non-N95 type respirators. That list has gone through some fairly dynamic expansion and contraction over courses of the past 8-10 weeks, where initially there simply just wasn't enough product. They would loosen the requirements and expedite the qualification of products that are coming in, only to find after failures of their products, there's a contraction in those approved on the whitelist, and that have required further testing and qualification. And now now that we're what, about 5-6 months into the outbreak, we're reaching a steady state condition where both the availability of qualified manufacturers have increased, and yet at the same time, the goods have also, the quality goods have become more stable. So it's been really challenging for the sort of the manufacturers to get really quality goods out, and for the buyers to try to assess, as I was pointing out, what really works, what's actually acceptable.
Well, James, you know what it adds to that too is, are you running into issues with certifications and decertifications of these factories? Because I mean, the process has become kind of interesting. If you have a health company in America that will purchase that product, who's examine that product, you can literally go and take a couple of letters, go to the embassy, the U.S. consulate in whatever country you're in, and they can give you an interim FDA certification. But I mean, we're already getting notifications right now that factories in Vietnam are going to start getting decertified inside of the next 30 days. The other challenge you have is India came online, right? But I think we've all seen these gloves. The standard is 4 mil. Why? Because chemotherapy drugs require you to have 4 mil to handle them. Ideally, the surgical ones are somewhere between 5 to 8, and then those are sterilized in single pack. But the quality control on some of this stuff that's coming out, where the wholesale cost of these boxes is like $350. There's holes in the gloves. The stuff's less than 3.5 mils. It's all food grade. And so I think that there's the gown issue we've seen, right? And then there's also the issue with the state of Illinois literally putting China on blast with a letter from the state saying that you sold us a ton of fraudulent goods. And the challenge that we had in Texas, where, of the they stopped with the CDC list, they knocked a lot of stuff off of what was accessible or allowable 3 or 4 times. And what was interesting for the industry is because you have these KN95s that are available at like $1 a pop now, which were like $2.65. Why? Because they have boatloads of them and they can't get rid of them. But the bigger fraud that we're seeing, and I think this is where maybe the blockchain solutions might come in, is that you get a box and 30%, when you put the calipers on them, they test, right? And for everyone here who doesn't understand this, there's a thickness. There are usually 4 or 5 layers, and they're supposed to be a specific thickness. But 70% of the merchandise inside of those boxes will fail. So what we're saying is it's fake product inserted inside of that as well. So these are, figuring out who you're purchasing from and really kind of owning those relationships and going back to the manufacturers, I think is going to be key over the next 6 to 12 months. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you guys could make some exceptional points there. And I think one of the things you guys are getting at too is, testing and, to be able to actually assess real quality. And there are issues with that, right? I mean, even in Vietnam, if you're trying to do an SGS inspection on the actual test for the quality of the gloves, they can't actually do it in Vietnam. So they need to send it over to China, which is the nearest facility for testing. And that apparently will take 30 days for a turnaround. So the best thing you can do at SGS is simply do a visual inspection, which is not bad. You do a field, you can do it, but that's the limit. So it's interesting that a lot of people, obviously, everyone wants an SGS inspection, but there's a limit to what that can do. I want to move this over to Patrick, because we're getting very, very detailed now, which is great. Of course, we could talk like that for 24 hours or a whole week, but I want to bring this back out a little bit onto more of an aerial view, because Patrick, you have an exceptional background in business intelligence, and so I'm curious if there's anything interesting you came across in any of the data sets that you've analyzed, that are relevant to what's happening in the supply chain, and especially the stakeholders that are most needed this PPE. Any trends or anything that you've seen that's of note?
Yes. So the thing that we're seeing, I managed locally 26 hospitals out of Bakersfield. The supplies, the patients, the flow, everything. And it's incredible the amount of data that we have. And the data that we've been able to pull was based on assumptions 10 years ago that we could not even have known today. So the data that we have is kind of partial. So there's a leap that we have to make in terms of what does it all mean? And what we're finding is that two things. is that with all the automation, it's actually highlighting how weak communication is. Two, that there's so much data. It's not a lack of data. It's just there's so much data that drawing a correlation is very difficult. And it really takes data scientists to understand what the correlation is. As people become sicker, as more testing is done, of course the rates go up, but what it doesn't indicate is that we're actually using more tests. Finally, is in these type of situations, when you're searching for product, what I always look for in a big ticket item, and you correct me if I'm wrong, when you go buy a car, you like the way it looks, but overall you're buying a warranty. So you go look at a Honda, and I just saw a billboard today for Honda, that there's a 250,000 mile, 20-year warranty on the drivetrain alone. Now, that's not a bad car. Somebody who's willing to stand behind their product, that's a great sale. I wasn't a big fan of Hyundai, but I did spend a year in Korea, and they're great cars. And the thing with the Hyundais, they offer a 100,000 mile, 10-year warranty. How can you go wrong with something like that when money is important? So what I look at when I'm purchasing on large levels is what type of warranty or remediation do they offer? I know the product is homogeneous. It's a nitrile glove, 4 mil. It should do what it's supposed to do. But when there's a problem, will you return it? Will you send me the right stuff? I know these things are going to break. I know everyone's in a hurry, but I want to know, will they send me the right stuff? Next is, how do I know I'm getting the best price? So reverse auctions are really, to me, buying at a high level, important. So I developed a reverse auction called PPE Online Auction, in which case I represent very, very large buyers who have a need, and then I just source it out to vendors and say, what is your best price? Because I can buy gloves for $6 a box, but then I've got to get it here. And then the price of getting it here, CIF, goes up to $14 a box, and they think that I'm gouging. I'm not gouging. It's just that's what aircraft are charging or ships are charging to get it over here. So there's three phases. One is just acquiring the good. Two is getting it here. And then three is the quality control of the aspect. And for me, I look for partners who can manage those different elements. My auction works, my reverse auction works. I definitely have the buyers in the billions of product. The problem, as James had indicated earlier, is how do I make sure that the product is what I ordered?
I think that's super important. And to just one of the things that Patrick had mentioned, which is a huge consideration. At one point, FEMA had purchased a good chunk of all of the 747 cargoes coming into the United States. And that's not, I don't think that's necessarily the case right now, but they paid a higher premium for them. So we were talking about an aircraft that on a one-way trip from China typically cost us $350,000 to $380,000. And so you amortize that over the cost of how much product you can put in there. One of these, you can fit typically 3 million KN95 or N95 masks, right? Well, the cost of that plane for about 2 months went up to $1.4 million on average just to get it here one way. So all of those costs carry down. And I think, you know, a lot of this also speaks to the fact, work with med supply companies, work with folks who've come in. There's a lot of people that have come from a lot of different industries and sort of hopped in. You know, I mean, I was on the board of a company and I got asked to help out. And the people I'm working with have been in this industry for 20 years. And we've always done tech work and blockchain work and big data work and JCAHO, you know, type accreditations. But I think finding a track record of folks and then also really understanding some of the complexities that you're going to have on the ground. Boxes of gloves right now are typically going anywhere from 11 to 15. And a month ago, they were all the way up to 19 bucks. And part of the problem there is, who are you getting them through? What are the broker chains? And I think, you know, the reverse auctions are great, and Patrick, love to pick that up with you at some point. But to what James is saying about the production side of this too, that's a huge concern, because it's not just the quality and it's not the number of manufacturers. We're probably 8 to 12 months from running into, you know, just supply chain challenges with cotton. Okay, so when that happens, we're going to have a mask issue. And we're running into problems with the manufacturer of gowns. So that's going to create an additional issue. And so what we have to be thinking about is not just, how are we maintaining and managing these things. A lot of the hospitals we've talked to, they're starting to buy now for what they expect will be 30 days. Because, we saw the Memorial Day bump. We're now going to see the protest bump that happens after this. And then you'll see secondary, tertiary bumps from other events that happen. But it's also from a data standpoint difficult to say. I think we're still in the first cycle of this, right? And Patrick, would you concur with that? Can someone unmute Patrick?
Yeah, we need to unmute him somehow.
Yes. Yeah, I would concur with that. So we're looking at now yearly cycle of what will we need for the year, because we don't know when we can get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where purchasing should be looking. I also think from a budgeting standpoint, if you're working for a state, you should be looking at that. And we need to move away from some of these older systems. The way that states have been purchasing, it's like they're purchasing 3 years ago. It's like, are you on this approved vendor list, this, that, and everything else? I mean, we have access to, and I also think that there's some look that needs to be done in terms of what the treatments are, because the doctors we've been talking to, they should be treating this more like high altitude sickness than they should the respirators. But I have access to American-made respirators, and you should be at least trying to build a network of at least 5 to 10 people you're talking to inside of the supplier space if you're just a smaller hospital, because otherwise you're going to have 1 or 2 people just kicking you product, but you're not necessarily getting the best price.
May I comment on that from the hospital standpoint? I was noticing before the COVID, there was an actual drop in admissions. Now, hospitals survive on admissions, and really they survive on surgeries. And I was noticing back in November that there was already a massive drop. We were already laying off nurses. Now, remember, we're a high-end hospital. We were already laying off nurses and already canceling physician group contracts. We were already downsizing on the administrative side severely. There's across the board. Yes, go ahead.
Patrick, we have about 2 minutes.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
When would you like to give the final wrap-up question?
Maybe let Patrick answer this question.
So the thing is that the hospitals themselves are losing key personnel and a brain drain right before this already happened. So now when I want to make a purchase on a glove, like we had a needle, we just wanted a needle that we bought. There's a committee we have to sit on, meets once a month. We present it to the committee this month. Next month we think about it. And then the following month we make a decision. So it's 3 months to make a decision on anything. And that is a huge logjam, and nobody knows where to even source it. The logistics people are already stretched thin, and they don't have the staff that they used to have. The programs we're using, Cerner and Epic, are vastly outdated, and they have incorrectly billed billions of dollars worth of procedures, which now hospitals can't collect. Hospitals are hurting badly. So that's why going outside that chain and creating something like a reverse auction, just saying, here, it's here, just order what you need, take what you have and use it, because in an emergency, any port in a storm at this point, they'll use it, it'll break, but they'll use it because you have to have something.
Right.
That's a big logjam.
Okay, so I want to actually notice a perfect segue to say one thing, which is I think that everyone here has some exceptional information to share, and we will be doing more of these. And in fact, we can do one specifically just about exactly what you're talking about, Patrick. Talking about things, projecting out for a year. How do we actually, mitigate some of these issues about decision making? How do we actually get to the, cut through the noise on a lot of things? So we will be doing more of these, and I think this is incredible. I mean, just amongst the 3 of you, I think there's so much that we can talk about. Thank you guys again, really, for all the insights in such a short amount of time. I'm going to be handing it back over to Ellis to transition and introduce the next session.
Okay, so now let's move along to session 3, which is titled How to Conduct Global PP Transactions from Contact to Close. Hear from experts on what it takes to run cross-border PPE and medical equipment transactions. This session will be moderated by Lehman Bush. Mr. Bush, would you like to carry on?
Good, yeah, that's Edward Lehman. So that's my name, and thank you very much. And I'll be joined by my colleagues, Konstantinos and John Lehman. I am about more than 30 years in the life sciences industry in China, and I set up the China Association for Medical Device Industry in 1991, and the RDPAC, which is the Research-Based Foreign Pharmaceutical Industry Association. I'm managing director of Lehman Bush, and I'm also chairman of Lehman Lee & Shu law firm based in China.
I'm John Lehman. I'm director of Lehman Bush. Lehman Bush itself has been doing a few deals in the PPE space in the United States, Europe, and in Africa. Mainly sourcing in Asia. And I'll be speaking about how to reduce the purchasing risks, due diligence, and customs clearance.
Hi everyone. Good evening. Hello. My name is Konstantinos Hadjiannou. I'm the South China Director of Lehman Bush, and during this panel, I will touch upon the importance of quality control, alternative of sourcing countries, and I will give a brief overview of the general product flow in PPE transactions.
Great. We've got a PowerPoint, so I don't know, Konstantinos, are you able to put that up there?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. You all see the screen, yes?
Yeah, very good. So we'll pass on this one. That's who we are and a little bit about us. This first slide is just to show part of this, before we get going, and the last panel was fantastic, and this is a tremendous event, and thanks for inviting us to be a part of it. But when I think about it, it's a little bit like the three blind men trying to assess what an elephant looks like when you talk about the PPE industry. First blind man grabs the side of the elephant and says it's a wall. Second one grabs the trunk and says, well, this must be a snake. The third one grabs the tail and said, well, it's obviously a twig or it's a long stick. All three of them are right and all three of them are wrong. And what I can say, having dealt with in the health sciences industry in Asia for the last 30 plus years on the ground, is that this is a whole new area, which is good and bad. It creates a lot of opportunities for folks. And so I'm going to give our perspective on what we see as a model PPE purchase transaction. And the first of which is that it would be a purchase order issued by the terminal buyer to an importer. The financing and profit share agreements would be in place between the importer and the trader, and the purchase funds deposited with the trader in escrow. That's the way we've done it. The trader coordinates directly with the manufacturers in many cases in China, and we'll talk about this later. Also, it could be in other countries in Southeast Asia, like was pointed out by the last panel, and signs purchasing agreements. So this is kind of the flow where a lot of people see the deals going with a model PPE purchase transaction. So on to the next slide. I don't know how to move that forward. So again, I mean, we're just going to get into the weeds here a little bit. This is the way that we do it. It doesn't mean that it's correct for everybody. And what we're trying to do, Lehman Bush and Lehman Lee & Shu, which is the law firm that I work with, is we're trying to create a system that, as discussed on previous panels, there's been a lot of spot trading. There has been a lot of rushing to try to learn what's going on in the market. What we're trying to do is create a system. And so in essence, Lehman Bush is actually supplying financing for folks who need that based on purchase orders. And we're also involved with the supply side. We're also involved with the legal side, which is the Lehman Lee & Shu law firm, which has escrow agreements. A lot of what people have seen in the industry is that there has not been a lot of trust, and there's a lot of agents that that are involved in this deal. This isn't trade finance and trade deals like it used to be pre-COVID-19, where you could open up letters of credit and bills of lading. This is really a manufacturer seller's market, and not the other way around. And so what we've done with this is that if you look at the green arrows, that's the cash flow. If you look at the red, those are the agreements, and the black is the product. So typically in our situation, Lehman Bush would have an agreement with the buyer. Lehman Bush would then purchase the agreement with the manufacturer. We'd help supply that. Again, this is just an example. We've been involved where other people are helping to do the supply, and we cooperate with them as well. But typically this is the way we move forward. The financing agreement we'd have between the bank and Lehman Bush. So we have, just so all the folks on the call know, or on the conference here, is about a $250 million revolving line of credit, which we're extending for people in the PPE area. A lot of this is not problematic from a supply side, usually in many instances. A lot of times it's not a problem of getting purchase orders, but there's been a problem with financing. And so that's what we're trying to address in the system that we're talking about here with our financing model. The bank then, once we've got that in place, they deposit the funds to be able to have Lehman Bush purchase those funds in the law firm escrow, as you can see down there. And the escrow pays directly to the manufacturer at the behest of Lehman Bush. Again, we're working with partners to be able to do that. So we're open to discussion, and we have cooperated every step of the way with folks. Then the manufacturer ships the product to the buyer pays Lehman Bush, and then Lehman Bush pays back the bank and then distributes out to agents or whatever else under that escrow agreement. So as folks know, this has been largely a cash business, 100% upfront. In all my years as a lawyer, I've never heard these terminologies like proof of funds and proof of life until this PPE industry was started. I've heard about it in movies with regards to kidnappings and negotiation, but not with regards to trade finance. And so we're sort of in a new field, which presents both threats and opportunities. And the way we do the funding protocols, for anybody who might be interested, obviously contact us, and we're willing to talk about funding PPE and try to cooperate in any way, shape, or form. We would typically require a valid purchase order where Lehman Bush would be either the designee or the paymaster. So and this was brought up in the last panel, so the state of Texas might have certain parameters on their purchase orders. The state of Illinois might have certain parameters. But so we would either be in there as a Lehman Bush as a paymaster or designee, and we would then get pro forma contracts with regards to dealing. This is on the manufacturing side. Have to take a look at that, and we would be able to identify who are the beneficial owners, and that we're following KYC, OECD, the anti-money laundering, the Patriot Act, and other kinds of documents you'd have in any kind of financial transaction. This seems very complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. And then we wind up working with our bank, which is providing the line of credit to Lehman Bush. And once it's satisfied, we go forward with the transaction. That might happen, just so you know about the length of the funding protocols, would be it might be as long as 7 business days, but generally speaking, we try to make it less. And then the next, and then the way, just so everyone knows what an escrow agreement is, may or may not, there might be some lawyers on the line here or not, but an escrow account is a tender financing terms where the bank is opening under the name of the borrower, which in our instance would be Lehman Bush, and then the bank is a signatory to that. And an escrow account differs from other joint bank accounts and ordinary bank accounts because the lender is the only authorized signatory with transacting powers. But the reason I bring this up, and you can all Wikipedia what an escrow agreement is if you don't know, but is that we've been using these escrow agreements in cases with PPE where there's been a large number of agents and a lot of people who don't know one another, and they're asking for cash in advance. And so in essence, we're able to provide the funding and then use the escrow services to be able to manage the risk. And then I think that will segue into our next panelist, which is John Lehman, talking about reducing the purchasing risks.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah, so the typical Chinese PPE factory will seek to load all of the risk onto the foreign buyer. And they can get away with this because there is, a global shortage in PPE. And it's truly a seller's market, at this point in time. And you better be sure that you're, dealing with a legitimate, reputable supplier or manufacturer. This is why we recommend that all our clients and people that we work with on these deals, have lawyers to conduct due diligence. We're very fortunate, to work with Mr. Edward Lehman here, who is managing director of Lehman & Shu. So it really helps streamline, our entire process. So if you want your future PPE orders to get through China Customs, you need to be certain of the following: that your paperwork is all in line, that there are no missing pieces, that your PPE product is of good quality and is obviously not counterfeit. Can do this by SGS inspection or testing, and the country to which the PPE product can be legally sent. That particular PPE product from China can legally receive it, which next moves me to due diligence, and how to reduce your risks by learning more about the legitimacy and reputation of the company from which you are looking to buy PPE. Some simple things you can do are to check the company website for professionalism and relevance to the product you will be buying. Another thing you can do if your end user or buyer is in the United States, you can check the FDA websites for certifications, make sure everything's in line there. Another thing you can do is verify the registered capital of the company. A higher official registered capital is suggestive of a legitimate company, less likely to be involved in scams or dishonest behavior because they have more on the line. There's more of that. There's more for them to lose. You can confirm the business scope. Every company in China has an approved business scope, which defines the type of business activities it may legally engage in. The business scope should include manufacture or scale of the type of product that you are purchasing. The company that is manufacturing the PPE product you will be buying from in China is licensed to make that particular product. There may be additional licenses required for medical devices such as PPE or personal respirator masks. And lastly, a simple factory visit is critical in confirming the professionalism and true manufacturing capacity of the supplier, which leads me to slide 8, customs clearance. So how to reduce the risk of your PPE products being held up at customs. China Customs is cracking down like never before on PPE leaving China. They have much more than just a watchful eye on all products leaving the country. You will require a collection of documentation in order to pass customs inspection for the export out of China. A joint declaration signed by the manufacturer and by the exporter is one of them. A filed online application for customs clearance, a business license of manufacturer required to prove whether or not the company is on the white list or not, a medical device production license of the manufacturer, a medical device production filing certificate, medical device registration certificate, or medical device operation license of the exporting company, a business license of the exporting company. Then it's followed by a bill of loading, a purchase invoice and packing list, purchase and sale agreements for products to be exported, product testing, evaluation report, and lastly, a letter of commitment for quality and safety. If your PPE does not qualify under all of the above, no matter when you bought it, it will get blocked from leaving China. Now, this leads me to the next slide about PPE contracts. So how to draft a PPE contract that will reduce your risks, including risk-reducing contract terms. So having a contract directly with the factory where possible, inspect, to inspect the product at the factory. It can be done by a third-party inspection service such as SGS. Payment only after inspection. Try and avoid blind prepayment. Draft the contract for the supplier reimbursement in the event a product fails to leave China customs clearance. Put in a clause about liquidated damages where possible. English and Chinese. You need to make sure you include the Chinese name of the company to really make sure everything is binding. And also, you need to verify the signing authority for the China company. And lastly, it needs to be executed with an official company seal or CHOP. And if you tick all of the above, everything should be looking in your favor. Thank you very much. Now I pass on to my colleague Konstantinos.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you. So quality control, as you probably know, it's a very important part of the transaction because it may lead or may not lead to a payment or not a payment from either side of the chain. If the product fails to pass quality control and you have already paid a deposit, you will need to find a way to either return the products or work upon them. So it's a very important part to have inserted in the contracts, as John was saying. And at the same time, the product quality will determine whether you're going to receive final payment from your end buyer. Few points on that. We've all seen recently a lot of issues with masks or other products on the quality control around the world from China and other parts. Some issues we can bring forward in order to help here and what we've been working with clients. First of all, starting, you have a differentiation between pre-shipment and during production inspection. Normally, everyone is going and suggests to do an inspection pre-shipment, so when product is already done. But we recommend to perform inspection on-site during the production schedule, even when you are receiving the raw materials. So this way, you can actually have an eye and have a saying during the whole chain of manufacturing, right? From the reception of the goods until the end of the production. Another important point is increase your sample sizes. Most inspection companies use the ISO 28559-1 specification that basically determines 3 levels of samples, level 1, 2, and 3, and different AQA levels at the same time to determine the error there. Of course, the higher level, the more thorough the inspection will be. So using a level 3 whenever is possible may be the best course to secure the quality with PPE. At the same time, do as many visual checks as possible when you are in the factory, when you are visiting, doing the inspection. A simple visual look to the sample size will determine very easy problems like loose threading or other potentials there. This includes the inspection of the packaging and of each individual unit in the sample size. Of course, product tests. Product tests are very important. Not always are possible, and it might take too much time with the PPE. But this doesn't mean that you cannot perform them. A good test list includes simple checks your inspector or yourself can do to catch major issues. For instance, in some products we were working on for clients on KN95 masks, you can easily check waterproofing, dye penetration, and the airflow yourself, right? The airflow, for instance, by trying to blow a lighter through the mask and see whether there is a penetration of the air. It's indicative things you can do to look whether the product is on the line that you are requesting. In-house lab tests, if it's not possible to send the products on a third party, on a certified third party lab, you may be able to conduct the test inside the facilities of your client, always having one of your personnel or a third party staff to overview that, and you can specify the similar tests to those done on a lab when you're booking your inspection. Another important part to remember is that all the products, they might need re-sterilization and general confirmation afterwards, or repacking, or the damaged goods by the inspection need to be kind of repaired by the factory. And all those, the important take from the quality control is try to foresee what might happen or the problems they might exist, so you can include them beforehand in all the legal documents together with the different tolerances and so on. So from the beginning of the process, all the different parties are well aware what to expect. So even if your product needs to be accepted by a client, or the product needs to be accepted for you from a supplier, you have a concrete guideline where to base this examination of the products and on your relationship with the counterparties. We're going to touch upon now a bit the sourcing and the abilities beyond China. We know that during the peak of the COVID epidemic, most of the sourcing was focused on China. But however, as the previous panel was also mentioning, Southeast Asian countries have ramped up production of PPE over the last 90 days. And we in Lehman Bush have identified several Asian countries with growing PPE production capabilities. Very briefly, on Southeast Asia, mainly Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Cambodia on gloves, gowns, and hair covers, same as Indonesia. Malaysia and Thailand more focused on gloves, and Vietnam, gloves, gowns, hair covers, and masks. We've seen lately interesting reusable masks from Vietnam as well. An important fact is that in April, US AID identified 180 potential Vietnamese suppliers with high capacity production facilities for the manufacturing of medical gowns, as well as gloves, face masks, and other face protective gear as well. So overall, they have a larger percentage of exports when it comes to gloves and gowns, as opposed to other PPE material. Other important points to take into consideration in these countries is the tariff schemes with major destination markets like Europe or US might be more preferable than China, for instance. And as far as we know, the using of financial instruments are currently more welcome in those countries, like letter of credit, or even local financing by local financial institutions like Vietnamese banks or others. This will lead us a bit on the kind of a quick wrap up of the product flow from the manufacturing to the end destination. Of course, the first step starts with the manufacturing facility. There is where you can, from the very beginning, you can make your visit. Afterwards, you have the inspection when you receive the materials, the during production inspection, and before loading. Afterwards, the goods are probably going and moved to the storage, to the port for storage area, for storage, custom clearance, and inspection if that takes there. Here it's important, as John was mentioning before you are leaving the factory and before starting the custom clearance, to be sure you have all the paperwork in line. You have all the necessary documentations for export, joint declarations, and so on, so you don't delay your cargo or you don't have any problems at customs. At this point as well, and in relation with the third step, which is loading on the vessel or on the airport, is be well planned in advance about your ETD, your ETA, when you want to arrive on the destination country. That's important in order to book in advance the vessel and the flights. During the epidemic and even until now, a lot of the air cargo shipments, the space is kind of tight. So if you are speaking about high volume cargo, probably you will need a big space. So it's well to be planned on advance. Of course, after the loading and departure, the bill of landing is issued. The vessel is going to the destination. The bill of lading, together with all the commercial invoice, packing lists, and the rest of items, can be used as, of course, the proof of departure, that in many cases can be used for payment issues, can be used as a proof for financial settlements, can be used as well as a depository document in case of depository conclusions with other financial institutions. And then you have the arrival in the destination country. At that point, we consider very important to be able to have all the documents in line also that the destination country will require to custom clear, apart from the shipping documents. In the case, for instance, in Europe, all the CE certificates or the private declaration of conformities well in advance. So if there's any problem or any issue, you can take action before the vessel is arriving or upon arrival, so you don't incur in problems. And the same with the US, with FDA, CDC, and all the rest of the local authorities. Of course, then after arrival and the custom clearance, the goods are delivered to the client, to the storage for their final inspection, and then the delivery to the different facilities, points of sale or point of usage, medical facilities, and so on. So the key here is, in every step, to be able to have everything, to foresee the risks, what might perhaps go wrong, and have all the documentation beforehand, and all of this flow and all of these documentations, insert them in your negotiations and during the transaction itself, either with the buyer, either with the seller or the supplier or the vendor, and the buyer on the other side. So the real transaction and the real product flow to go as smooth as possible, and avoid any problems.
Great. Thank you, Konstantinos. Just want to let you guys know we have 1 minute left before moving on to. Thank you.
Okay, great. I mean, let me just say thank you very much on behalf of our group, and thank you, Konstantinos, thank you, John. What we tried to do is, it's again a huge, wide topic. It's the wild, wild west. I think the opportunity is there. I've been, like I said, involved in decades of this kind of work, and this is sort of a game changer, and it's shifted the paradigm with regards to it. For those of you who are involved in this PPE work, like we are, it turns out to be about 18-hour days, and the volume of deals are great. The number of unicorns being chased are also a larger number, and a number of these deals go pear-shaped because of it. What we tried to do today was just give a broad overview from our humble perspective as one of the three blind men assessing the elephant. As far as folks that there was a number of questions that came to me. I'll try to answer them personally, or Constantinos or John will. The financing can be approved based on the PO if it's to the state, for those that are looking for financing, but just address it to a state or to a government, but also to a corporation. It's just a little bit more time consuming with regards to that. So I think we're right up against it with time, and I'd like to thank Simon for the opportunity for our group to be able to give this short presentation.
Thank you all. This has been a fantastic panel, so really, really appreciate all of you.
Thank you very much. I think the big concern that we have in the global economy now is that without the ability to open up these economies again, there might be sustained sort of economic issues with a lot of these regions of the world. So I think the big question then is the strategy to be able to do this reopening. So today we're going to be talking about that, the economic situation in different parts of the world, reopening strategies taken by different countries. And we have a very amazing panel of experts who have insight on this. So with that, I would like to have each panelist maybe give a minute or two brief introduction and what they're doing in this regard.
Who do you want to start, Michael?
Yes, Daniel, please.
All right, I'll go first. Daniel Sloan. I'm one of the co-founders of Future Tech, and I'm the blockchain AI practice manager here. I've been in the information technology industry since 1995. I got fortunate enough right out of the Marine Corps to find a job in this amazing industry, and have been a serial entrepreneur and built multiple companies. 2016 got into the blockchain space and really fell in love with the technology, the ability to do things that you can never be able to do before. Blockchain really excited me. Future Tech is a company that's a joint venture with my partner Accubits, who has created a outbreak or pandemic management platform initially for governments, and we've adapted that to enterprises so they can bring employees back safely, and for businesses to help them reopen.
All right. Thank you very much, Daniel. Next we have JD, please.
Hi, everybody. JD Wang, CEO and founder of Intertech Solutions. We operate and manage 4 different entities. We're here in Southern California in the San Bernardino County, so about 60 miles or 100 kilometers east of Los Angeles. We operate out of 2 factories currently, and at the peak, pre-COVID, we had about 50 employees, ranging from office and salaried staff down to production and manufacturing. So my background is, managing material science and environmental projects and entities. So we have a few ventures that are doing material science recovery, resource recovery, recycling, product manufacturing. Background in chemistry. I have several chemists that work for us. So when COVID hit, we quickly pivoted with our chemistry and some of our assets, and right behind me, we're actually localizing some hand sanitizers, and later on I'll be sharing with you guys about how we're trying to reopen, but in a very safe way. At our peak with our 50 employees, it was really difficult to let them go, but we're on a slow climb back to reopening.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Kareem, you're up next.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon for me, because I'm in Africa, based in Africa. So my name is Kareem Bendao, and I'm a physician by training, and surgeon to be more precise. and I've been for the past 20 years serving the science and technology industry. And in this specific case, you know, Merck, which is a German company, you know, based close to Frankfurt. And I have been building and establishing the African operation. And since 2 years, I have decided to leave the operations, and I'm taking care more about global health, governmental affairs, and political issues and strategies about Africa, and dealing and coping with the Africa Union, dealing with the WHO. I'm also the head of the Africa Committee at the level of the International Federation for the Pharma Industry, which is based in Geneva. And I'm operating from either Tunis in the northern part of Africa or Joburg in South Africa. And personally, I'm living in Nice on the French Riviera. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Stan. Stan, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stan Stolniker, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and founder of Hub Culture. Hub Culture is a digital technology ecosystem company. We were one of the first social networks established back in 2002. We were very early in digital currency with Venn in 2007. And then we moved into digital identity in 2014 with something called Hub ID. Within Hub ID, we had developed a health component so that people were able to control some of the digital identity health data around their kind of digital profile or their digital footprint. And when COVID happened, we began working with these different tools in a couple of different ways. One of the outcomes of that has been a new project that I'll be talking about today called Aqua. You're all getting the first preview of it because no one else has really seen it other than a couple of the governments. But what Aqua does is it takes the individually owned data around your digital identity, and it allows you to do three things. Number one, you can connect with your doctor and generate a digital health certificate. So if you have a negative test result or even a positive test result, you can actually arrive with a digital certificate that you can share at an international border with like a immigration official or a health official. It also has the ability to track symptoms. And then we also were doing electronic quarantine, where you can essentially be managed, quarantine yourself from country to country with a wearable. And so all those things together create what we'll be talking about today with Aqua and the expansion of digital identity into the health realm.
All right, thank you very much, Stan. I think maybe we can start with by just really looking at different parts of the world and seeing what kind of the on-the-ground situation is. I'd like to start with you, Kareem. You have a very good insight in terms of what's happening with Africa. We all know that Africa actually is now becoming a little bit of a hot zone and having to deal with a lot of the issues there. And also because of the fact that there isn't a lot of infrastructure built up in those regions. Can you give us a sense as to what is happening in Africa and what the challenges are in terms of their reopening strategies?
Thank you, Michael. Yes, indeed, this continent is about 54 countries. It's a huge one. I mean, to travel from the southern part to the northern part, I have to fly 12 hours. So it's also what 1.2 billion population, and until now, the impact of the COVID, of the corona on the continent was only, at the end, it's only 350,000 cases and 4,000 people passed away, you know, 4,000 deaths. So it's not huge for the time being. But most of the African countries have been under strict lockdown regimen and other restriction for over 3 months. And during this time, we've seen kind of economic recession, which has become socially extremely sensitive. We have now, most probably, due to this lockdown, more than 150 million African who will be losing their jobs. So it's not, it's something very difficult to manage. This represent almost 30% of the active population. So that's that's a very difficult equation to resolve. As our countries and our continent start to reopen the economies, we heard WHO stating that in the 12 coming months, they are expecting to see 200,000 deaths in Africa. So during the lockdown, we have been able to control the situation almost in most of the countries, with the exception maybe of South Africa and Egypt. But the rest was quite decent and acceptable. You know, the country where I'm living, Tunisia, is 12 million population. It's 1,000 cases and 52 deaths, which is nothing. But now we are reopening. We are reopening. And the question is, are we ready to reopen? No. But we cannot also keep this lockdown, you know, this lockdown ongoing, because people will die from hunger. As simple as that. I mean, so it's not. And the continent now is reflecting quite a wide range of approaches in terms of reopening. You have a very conservative one in South Africa, and you have a very open one subject to distanciation rule in the northern parts of the country, such as Tunisia, also Ghana, are very, very open. The problem is that if the lockdown is a central and a federal decision and you know, central power decision, the reopening should be local. Should be local, because it should be adapted to the real situation. But how can we know? How can we have an idea of the real situation if we are not testing? And in Africa, we are not testing. We are not testing. Let's say that a very low average per thousand population testing is 25. You know, it's the average of Southern Europe country. Huh? The highest rate is in Mauritius Island in Africa, and it's 11 per 1,000 population. So we don't know what is happening. This is the first thing. If you don't know what is happening, how can you test, trace, and isolate? That's why some organizations are worrying, such WHO, such Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, and they are, and we are also the civil society and the health players. We are also worrying seriously about what's going to happen. It's really a kind of roulette, you know. We don't know exactly how things will evolve. Therefore, we need to provide the local decision maker, I mean the local authorities, with a set of tools which allow them to take the most adapted decision for their population. I mean, from the full lockdown to just a simple distancing. But we have also a second issue that we have to resolve: the supply of PPE. The supply of PPE. We are lacking of tests. We are lacking of masks. We are lacking of almost everything. So therefore, we need also to organize like 2 or 3 points in Africa, one maybe in South Africa, another one in the northern part, and eventually another, the third one in the eastern part, because the continent is huge, where we can concentrate and we can ship and freight all this PPE equipment, and then discuss with the Africa Union Center for Disease Control. You know, we have a kind of United Nations for Africa, which is the Africa Union, and we need to discuss with them, and we are discussing with them, with the CDC, how can we organize this 3-point. We don't have in this free area on the airport or in the port GDP warehouses where we need to increase the quality of the warehouses. So these are them. And we have also now to provide an equitable access to health, to the entire population. Otherwise, also the virus will spread more than any other region in the world. You know, and what is equitable access? Equitable access is to make sure that each and every African can have access to mask, PPEs in general, can have access to vaccine the day where we will have vaccine. So for that, there is two options: import the goods. The second one, enhance the local manufacturing. And this is ongoing. So basically, we don't have this situation that we see in Latin America, as an example, in LATAM. But maybe the worst is coming. Maybe we shall see. But anyway, I think this pandemic will last for at least until we will get a vaccine in this part of the world, another 1.5 years, and we need really to enhance all supply chain issues in terms of PPE and also in terms of local manufacturing. On the other hand, we see this crisis also as a huge opportunity to accelerate the big changes happening in Africa since a couple of years. So, as you know, it's an emerging continent, it's emerging countries, group of countries, but it's also double-digit growth countries in terms of economy. So
yeah, Karim, maybe we can summarize a little bit. We need to get to some other people as well. Okay, yeah, okay. So thank you very much for what's happening in Africa. I would like to maybe move on to what's actually happening in America. I think that's the big question on everybody's minds. We have an election cycle. We have a lot of confusion with what's going on, and from the sort of national level and also the state level. I would like to rope in JD for your opinion. JD, you have a very good, clear understanding of what's happening on the ground situation. Please let us know what your thoughts are in terms of the reopening of America.
All right, thank you, Michael. Definitely echo what you were just saying. There is confusion. Us being in California, we kind of are our own nation state at times. So we follow right now what Governor Newsom at the state level has implemented. And so he's going off of a very science-based approach. Our reopening strategy has always been very clear for us. It's a 4-phase program. We're actually only in phase 2, and that's actually early phase 2. But unfortunately, with our state being so big and so many constituents, the county level are taking their own approach as well. So various other counties near us, like Orange County, they've accelerated into a phase 3 where there's some higher risk activities. So I'm just reading off of the California roadmap. Stage 2 is essentially just lower risk workplaces, so offices, manufacturing, logistics, and limited personal service entities. So for instance, myself, we are officially in phase 2. One of my entities was a phase 1 entity. We were considered an essential business, so we continue to stay open. But there is a lot of confusion, but I think it's also less political. I will try not to talk about that too much, but there's definitely COVID fatigue, and especially Southern California. The weather's nice, school is out, we're approaching holidays. So unfortunately, we're seeing lots of people breaking protocols, the bubbles being broken, and people are going out. Even though Governor Newsom issued a mandatory masks, we're seeing pushback from various counties. My county in particular, San Bernardino County, has relatively stayed on course with what the state has been issuing for us. So we have a myriad of COVID compliance programs, many different task forces that get the message out to the business owners, manufacturers, and different industries out here. However, at this time, we all know that the numbers are climbing. So, 3 months of shelter in place may be for naught if the numbers continue to climb. California just a few days ago had record numbers that weren't seen since the beginning of COVID. So we're certainly not flattening the curve. And I think most people understand that if we don't reduce the curve, we don't get a good hold on this virus, reopening is going to be set back. So it's a delicate balance, definitely different confusion. But at least from the federal side, CDC has been very clear to us as manufacturers in my industry specifically. So we go with CDC guidelines, we go with California state guidelines and county guidelines.
Okay. Thank you very much, JD, for that insight. So I think with these economies opening up, either forced or otherwise, and also because of things like COVID fatigue, it is absolutely critical to have technology solutions to be able to do things like contact trace and to actually sort of modulate with data-driven analytics what's happening in these different areas. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Daniel. Daniel's working on some of these type of solutions. Daniel, maybe you can describe the technology and describe how maybe some of these countries are leveraging your technology to reopen their economies.
Certainly. So, you know, when the COVID, you know, first kind of outbreak happened in China, you know, my partner, Jathin, who's a CEO and founder of Accubits, started working with the AI and bioresearch lab. So they have virologists and other scientists that actually started working on trying to, you know, help find a cure. And through the research, they discovered a molecule and they open sourced that. But I mentioned that just because that whole exercise really enlightened us to the fact that, you know, we aren't going to get a vaccine for a couple of years. So we need some other type of interim solution to combat the virus. So a non-pharmaceutical way. And so the first version of our outbreak / pandemic management solution was born, called Rebuild the Chain. So the idea was this could be a tool that governments could use to kind of help reopen things, right? Create safety zones, be able to track and trace. And we really understood that given how data privacy is so paramount to people, we actually built it on blockchain, which for people that don't understand that, it's very simply, we lock the data in a way to where you as the user get a private key, and nobody can view that data without your private key. The government can't hack it, nobody can hack it. And so having that ability to say to their citizens, hey, you can use this app and not worry about being spied on or being tracked, you know, it's anonymous data, that's been a huge boon, because that's been the pushback, right? A lot of countries are trying to roll out apps that, you know, people don't want to download. They'd rather take their chances with getting COVID. And when we really started looking at this, you know, I have to echo the COVID fatigue, right? You know, people are getting sick of being locked down. You know, I think Dr. Karim said it best, you know, if we don't reopen, people are going to starve to death. So we really saw that we need to have a technology that companies can use to reopen safely, businesses like hotels and restaurants can reuse. So we adapted the technology to allow the creation of green zones to basically be able to kind of cordon off an area and have kind of advanced screening, Michael. So how deeply you screen is up to you. So we are working actually with Liquiditi and other companies that provide testing solutions, right? So if you want to go to the extreme measures that you need to test before you come into the green zone, you can take the test. If you're COVID free, you get you get your health card, which is on an app that you download, and then you're able to enter the green zone. So the idea is, let's say you green zone a mall and there's 1,000 businesses. Well, through one implementation of the technology and setting up a green zone at the mall, you've now reopened 1,000 businesses and everyone can go inside and operate freely. Well, we started looking at and saying, okay, testing can get expensive. You know, if you're a worker at that mall and your company's having to pay to get you tested every single day to ensure you don't have COVID, you know, over 365 days, that's going to get expensive. So we started looking at technology that could help us identify asymptomatic COVID patients, right? And one of the ways that has been proven is that your blood oxygen level can determine if you're not showing symptoms, you don't have a fever, but maybe you have COVID, that's a good indicator. So we're working with a company that has these oxygen meters, these pulse oxygen meters, right? So the idea is we're going to couple with our software some of the hardware that not only does it scan your face, and you know, JD is right, you know, not everybody's wearing a mask, so it detects whether you're wearing a mask or not. It takes your temperature, and then you, within, you know, 10, 12 seconds of putting on the finger coupling, it'll take your blood oxygen level. So the idea is with the software that would generate a management by exception kind of thing, right? So you get 1,000 people going through there, everyone's blood oxygen level's fine, and all of a sudden, Daniel comes through and mine set off the alarm. Well, don't let me in, right? You're going to pull me to the side. And then that's where having kind of a rapid test kit there could be the stopgap. Instead of saying you can't come in, say, okay, let's test you for COVID. So instead of having to test everyone for COVID when they come in, you're just testing the people that are failing that blood oxygen level. I really feel like after I've been looking at all of this, that's a long-term solution. Maybe initially people test like crazy just to ensure no one's coming in because everyone's worried about insurance and getting sued. But I feel like if we can catch the people that maybe have COVID that are asymptomatic, that could really help to flatten the curve, because that's the problem, right? I go somewhere, I get infected, and I'm out for 2 weeks touching surfaces, meeting people, shaking hands, and I'm passing COVID around, and all of a sudden I go through some disinfection gate or something like that, and it shows I have a temperature. Well, I've been traveling for 2 weeks. I've literally been a carrier passing this along. We need to find a way to catch people as soon as they get COVID to determine that they have it without testing.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. And to speaking about that, the other end of the solution is if, you are asymptomatic, then you have to go through this quarantine period. So actually, I'd like to turn to Stan, who's actually talking about solutions or developing solutions, I think with the test bed in Bermuda, about how to do that. So Stan, please give us a couple minutes on what your solution is and how this helps the overall ecosystem.
Great, thank you, Michael. So as I mentioned before, Hub Culture has been working with a couple of governments to develop a new product called Aqua, and Aqua stands for Active Quarantine User Ally. And it started off with the need for what we would call active quarantine, which is this idea of the 14-day quarantine, which has become a fairly global standard for a person who is essentially crossing a border right now. So I'm currently in the United States, but I'm in Hawaii. There's still a 14-day quarantine going all the way until August for everybody who arrives onto the island, whether they're positive or negative. And this is true in many other countries around the world. But as things begin to open up, as for instance, Spain, the UK, Greece, they're looking now at this idea of travel corridors where an international traveler would land, be tested, and then be monitored for 2 weeks, but wouldn't have to necessarily stay in a geofenced location. So, Michael, is it possible that I can do a screen share to show a picture of the bracelet?
We got 4 minutes left, so let's just try to keep it brief. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So just to give you guys an idea, the bracelet runs off of Bluetooth Low Energy, and it is something that you would put on and wear, a little bit like a smartwatch. And it then sends a beacon signal to the app, which was Aqua. And then that sends a beacon signal to the cloud, essentially a cloud database, where there's a monitor on the other side. One of the things that's very unique about Aqua is that we put all of the data ownership and the data management into the hands of the end user. So you as a person who has an Aqua bracelet and who has access to the app, you can control who's getting the information from the app yourself. There is a kind of hashed database system for the identities to make sure that you are anonymized. And you can even set a persona in between yourself and the government official if you don't want it to be directly linked to you. But on the government side, what we actually have to do is provide the address of the quarantine location and the heartbeat signal for the monitoring of the data itself. And so all these things basically work together to form a kind of ecosystem. What we're finding is that now that we've launched the app and the website, you can go and see it at theaqua.world, theaqua.world. And what we're now adding is really symptom tracking, because what we're finding from our conversations is that the 14-day hard lockdown is probably only going to happen with travelers who arrive and are tested and then turn out to be positive, and you need to have a scaled system for quarantine management, because in many countries you have hundreds of thousands of arrivals a day. So you don't necessarily want to be giving 150,000, 200,000 people every day a bracelet that is then going to be monitoring where they're going. So the bracelet itself will probably evolve to be something for positive cases only. And then the negative cases would be about doing self-reporting and symptom tracking that goes into the monitor side, where if your symptoms change, then they have the ability to reach out to you. And then the final component of that is really the ability to get a digital health verification. We built a database of doctors and hospitals. So you can go in, you can invite your doctor, and then your doctor can issue you a verification on your test result. Because that's the other thing. I mean, you have a million different pieces of paper at the border. How do you know what's a real test result or not a real test result that a person might be showing? So it just provides a little bit more clarity for the officials that are involved in that.
Okay, Stan, very good. Actually, we are almost out of time. So what I wanted to do is maybe just give each of the panelists a really brief 30-second spot just to give us your advice. We have the fall coming up. We have reopening happening. We got a lot of very, very difficult dynamics in some of these regions. What advice would you give to your respective region in terms of things that could actually be useful in solving the reopening as they go along? So please, maybe start with Kareem. Yes.
Kareem's muted.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yes.
In a nutshell, I think this crisis in Africa is accelerating the trends such as digitization, market consolidation, this regional cooperation, and it's really creating new opportunities to boost local manufacturing, to formalize small businesses, to create hubs, to resolve issues which have never been resolved in the past, and to invest in health systems.
Okay, thank you very much, Kareem. How about you, JD?
So
Advice for
for me-
America? Very difficult question.
So for me, it's really about being a leader with your community. So being involved with your community, caring for each other, that's how we can reopen. So for my entities, you know, we have really transparent talks with our staff. How are you doing mentally, physically, economically too, so we can understand each other and how to help each other. That's the only way we're going to get out of this. I believe the technology solutions are going to come, but if we're not part of the community with good leadership, we're never going to reopen in a smooth, safe way.
Okay, thank you very much, JD. Daniel, any last words?
Yeah, I want to echo what JD said. I think as much as I'm in the tech space, you know, it's the use of these tools, it's the use of the tech, and to that point, you know, my one thing that if anyone that's listening is in a position to say, okay, I'm evaluating and how can we reopen our county, our state, or whatever, pick technology that people will actually use. Don't look at like India and some of these places that literally put out these apps, spent millions of dollars in tech, and nobody's using it. You know, pick a solution that people will actually use, and then that in turn will enable the reopenment and help people be safely doing it.
Okay, wonderful. And Stan, you with the last word, please.
Thank you. Well, I would agree with everybody else there on the panel, and I would sort of add to that I think we also have to really keep in mind the big picture here. Like, we're in a sort of very acute crisis at the moment, but there are also much bigger trends that are happening around digitization and data privacy and data ownership that we should be paying attention to. There are some principles around freedom and these sorts of things, the ability to own your own data, that I feel are extremely important. And we have to be careful that we don't end up building ourselves boxes that we can't get out of later. So the ability to have open systems that people can opt in and opt out of and have as much end user control and individual freedom, I think is really important to remember as we're building these systems, because once they're built, they're going to be potentially used in other ways. And I think we just need to keep that in mind and make sure that we're building things that are going to, you know, advance our society as opposed to potentially hem it in.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. Certainly, I think this is the big question coming into the fall, is whether these economies can open up successfully. We certainly had a lot of insight from the panelists in different regions, and also a little sample of the technologies that can be brought to bear to solve these sort of difficult issues. So thank you very much for the panelists for everything. And with that, I'm turning it back to Simon.
Thank you, Simon, for having me here today. It's an honor to moderate this panel. As Simon mentioned, I was one of the founding team members of Tom's Shoes. Tom's is a shoe company with a really simple mission, where for every pair of shoes that we sell, we give a pair to a child in need. We started the business in an apartment in Venice. Every pair of shoes had glue stains on them. They were in Argentine sizes, not American. This is back in 2006. What started as the most simple idea is today a global movement that's helped to give over 100 million pairs of shoes to children around the world. I transitioned out of Tom's in 2018. I've been a full-time angel investor now for 5 years. It's been a pleasure to invest over $25 million of capital into purpose-driven businesses. I consider myself professionally curious. I meet the smartest and most interesting people that are creating world-changing businesses. Companies like Thrive Market is an online Costco for healthy and organic foods, Hims, the beverage brand Liquid Death, and a company we're going to hear from today called Unstoppable Domains. What we're going to be talking about today is advancing social impact during the pandemic. I'm going to be joined by 3 experts and investors in the space. The first is Paul Kirchhoff. Paul is a serial tech entrepreneur, community builder, and investor in purpose-driven communities. Since COVID started, Paul founded Operation Spirit Lift, a nonprofit providing hand sanitizer and COVID testing to communities in need. We'll then be joined by Susan Oh, coming to us from Thailand. Susan is a professional BS detector and the co-founder of Mucker AI, an artificial intelligence solution for identifying fake news on the internet. And our third panelist, is Brad Cam. Brad is the co-founder of Unstoppable Domains, a company onboarding the world to the decentralized web. Brad is a champion of free speech, human rights, and the power of blockchain to create a better world.
Love it.
There we go. Paul, how are you?
Good to be here, man.
Good. So I'd love to start out, starting with you, Paul. Give us 60 to 90 seconds. Tell us how you got here and what you're most excited about.
Well, I mean, God, I'm excited about a ton of stuff. I probably have too many things because in addition to investing and being active, I've got a few different companies. One's a new business social network for a bunch of super achievers, people swimming oceans and discovering Columbus's ship and all sorts of cool stuff that is not what this is about. But, you know, I've been fortunate enough to start my next couple of companies that have impact dead center. There's a platform that I started called Domino One, which crowdsources problem solving. So it actually empowers people at the bottom of the pyramid to come solve anything, like how should we reopen our communities, or what is the best way to deliver testing? How do we solve, racial tension? But during the COVID, set of events, you're exactly right. The first idea I had was, what about all the people that don't have access to hand sanitizer? I grew up right by the Grand Canyon, the Navajo Nation, and some of them don't have running water. So I started a little crowdfunding platform, being a software and marketing guy, to help that out. But the real big move, which is pertinent to this group, because it's an open invitation, is that another entrepreneur and I started talking about maybe 4 months ago about what's going to restart the economy. And we knew it was a collection of technologies. It was a collection of capabilities. And eventually, everybody had to have confidence when they came back to a theater or a restaurant, or even sitting next to your parents or family. So we pulled together what is the start of a industry coalition of medical testing companies in America. And we've got about 24 of these folks. Anybody on here who is doing anything positive to help with the testing community of the United States, but we can carry this forward, is welcome to join. And I'm proud to say that after you bring together an entire industry, which is already a super ambitious project, you have the ability and the capacity greater than any single company. So you know, right now we have the ability to go body slam Austin, Texas, where I live, and keep it body slammed, right? But all the stuff that the guys were talking about in the previous discussion is totally pertinent, and it just extends the power. And I think when we have a crisis like this, it requires everybody with their oar in the water going in the same direction. And that's the start of this coalition, because I don't think we're going to get out of it without everybody pulling together on behalf of the species,
Amazing.
let alone America. Yeah.
Save your good stuff. We got more questions
okay.
to come. Going to you, Susan. Tell us, what is a professional BS detector? How does one become that?
Hi. Oh, you're frozen. Am I frozen? Okay. How does one become a professional BS detector? In my previous career as a journalist, as a mainstream media journalist, I must have interviewed thousands of people. And they were outliers in the way that if you were being interviewed, say by Newsweek or CNBC or the Economist Intelligence Unit, it meant that you were extraordinarily good at something or extraordinarily bad, but nothing in between. And along the way, you build kind of a baseline knowledge of the patterns of ambiguity, where you should start investigating a little bit more. You look for the patterns, the anti-patterns, incongruities, and dig deeper there. So, you know, when I started to learn about this technology to solve a specific problem, because my background, of course, is in storytelling, and storytelling and facts, facts being validated by two independent sources. That was the litmus test in traditional journalism. I went through a lot of myths of what worked and what actually did not work in terms of machine learning, in terms of blockchains, and different systems. And that's just on the technical level. There's also, of course, you know, the system itself, you know, the platform, the circulatory system of what it is that you're actually trying to build, and the transactional value of this thing. And so, you know, being a startup investor, you know that there is a lot of hype around technology and around businesses. And when one investigates as to what works and what doesn't work, there are things that work. It just might not work for your particular situation, correct? So I guess that's so I guess in short, for the last 4 years, I've spent examining technological tools that could help me identify patterns in disinformation campaigns and trolling tactics, and went through just about all of them that do not work, that cannot work, before I came across a model that could.
Amazing. And finally, we have Brad Cam. Brad, what is a human readable domain, and why are they important?
Sure, and thanks a bunch for including me. So my company, Unstoppable Domains, we build a new type of domain name system, one that is not part of the traditional world of DNS, which you probably use, like your .coms and things like that. We've built a separate system. We have our own domain names. They're called .crypto. And the idea is that the domains are stored by you. A traditional .com domain is stored by like GoDaddy or somebody else like that. And the problem with that is that GoDaddy can take it away from you. And they do. And it's actually quite easy. And this is a big problem around the world, where if you want to say what you want, if you want to express yourself, if you want to do something or say something maybe controversial, your domain could be taken away from you, your website could go down. And so blockchain domains provide a tool that would allow you to have a censorship resistant website, one that only you can put up and only you can take down. And there's an added benefit in the crypto world, where if any of you have ever made a crypto payment before, you've probably seen these like 40 character, really, really long addresses that are very hard to read, remember, copy and paste. Well, the domain name is going to replace those. And so you'll just, type in a domain name to pay instead of one of these long addresses.
Good. If after this panel we were excited and wanted to send you crypto, what is your personal human readable domain?
Brad.crypto. No need to send tips, but of course they're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. We live in a very different world today than we did in December or January. COVID has changed all of our lives. I'm curious, starting with you, Paul. As an entrepreneur, what fires you up about COVID? What opportunities do you see?
Well, I mean, it's hard to put your finger on one specific thing, because I think so many new things have become possible. I mean, for example, if you take a filter, like you're going to bake a cake and throw the flour in there, except this time it's people selling masks and stuff, and you take away the clowns that are profiteers that are doing it. I mean, when else in the history of the world have you had a fundamental supply chain, just completely blown away in the span of a week, right? Where everybody has a chance to enter a market. But that's kind of a silly example, because the truth is, I mean, look at contact tracing, the need for and the very fine lines that exist with depending on your values there. But AI is coming to the rescue. Blockchain is present in many of the applications we're seeing. The speed of testing and breaking apart even the FDA's process in many cases, trying to get it an immune therapy approved. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think one of the things that is serving the couple of businesses that I have is, there's a further decentralization of empowerment happening beyond the use of technology. I mean, we had a discussion yesterday, and to me, it started a while ago, like when the Amazon was burning, and just in a non-coordinated fashion, you had humanity together starting to wake up and putting pressure on the right things because it was the right thing for the crowd. And you see that with social justice. And I think that what's happening is, a lot of the technology that a lot of my friends, Susan as well, that were helping to investigate and pioneer, that allowed for the controlled decentralization of these things is now starting to be met by the empowerment of the individuals that realize collectively you should and can govern huge chunks of value that has traditionally been centralized and given away. So I just, it's such a broad range of opportunity that I see that, I've just never been more excited and seen more opportunities than now. And it's because of this massive shift that happened. And there's the interpersonal stuff too, right? I mean, people are enjoying nature and they're slowing their life down, and people in India are seeing the Himalayas. It's just one after the other, not just technology or investments, but capability for humanity as a species to be empowered to take care of themselves is really, really cool.
Yeah. And for you, Susan, COVID has been an opportunity to spread both misinformation and disinformation about what's going on in the world. From your perspective of AI and tracking what's true on the internet, what have you seen, and like what type of either misinformation or disinformation should we be aware of?
Well, this is the thing, is like, when you say like tracking truth, I don't touch truth, because truth is based on interpretation, which is infinitely variable and almost impossible to model mathematically. What I'm specifically looking at are the patterns of creating and disseminating disinformation campaigns, not each individual content pieces, but a coordinated series of topics in the way that it's created and the way that it's pushed out, the velocity that it's pushed out, and measuring impact in the way of, time transients, how long it lasts, how far it's reached, and through the vectors of relationships that it's been funneled through. And so COVID is a really interesting use case, actually, as in that some of the disinformation that we've had, some of the misinformation. Now, I want to clarify, misinformation is when you get something wrong and you come back and you say, hey, my bad, I got it wrong, right? Disinformation is when it's designed specifically to leave ambiguous critical parts of the information, or it's meant to specifically target, stigmatize, divide, or inflame, or bring about negative sentiment to either, adverse reaction or to non-action, right? And so the interesting thing about COVID is that there was some misinformation that was coming out from official channels, such as, do not wear a mask won't do anything. Now we know that that's patently untrue, that we could stop the spread, especially from super carriers that show absolutely no symptoms, that can infect thousands of people within days if everyone had worn a mask and distanced within maybe 6 to 10 feet. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, it's like, what are some of the things that I'm seeing in terms of the disinformation?
That was great.
Okay.
Question for you, Brad. What fires you up about COVID? How is the world fundamentally different today? And what does that mean for blockchain technologies like unstoppable domains moving forward?
Sure. I think there's been a lot of focus and everybody's thinking about, wow, like, all these digital video companies, all these things like Zoom, or, like this is a fast transition. Basically, we just onboarded entire generations to, video chat over the course of a few weeks. And I think that's true and that's amazing. One thing that I think is not being talked about so much is that the same thing is happening with assets, with digital assets. Blockchains are about digital assets. The physical world and the assets that exist in the physical world are not being used at the same rate. Oil consumption is down. It's difficult to go and acquire more real estate, or even if you had more real estate, could you even use it because you can't travel? So all of a sudden, the physical assets that we have been investing in, relying on, using are less important, and the digital assets are more important. And I think this is a trend that a lot of us in the blockchain world were expecting to happen, over the course of years, decades, whatever. But this is, sort of a supercharging event where now everyone's at home. You can't use physical assets, and people are now looking more towards digital assets. And domain names in particular are essentially digital real estate. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can do with digital real estate, and now's the time to do it. It's kind of it's a bizarre trigger, and I don't even know that when this was happening that we really realized what it was going to look like. I think in early March we were unclear what COVID was actually going to do or how it was going to impact it. And now 3 months in, I think we can say, like, digital assets just got a massive boost. And I think this is a world that I've been excited about for a long time, and we just got there probably way faster than we otherwise would have.
Yeah. I'm curious, taking a step back, going to you, Paul, and Brad is really articulating the why of what he does, of why he's so passionate about blockchain. From your perspective, Paul, what does it mean to be a purpose-driven entrepreneur? Like, when you wake up in the morning, what's the fire that gets you excited to work on the technology projects that you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's a very personal thing, because I had the blessing to grow up with parents that were poor. I was very middle class. I've worked, my ass off to be a little more comfortable than my parents, but I'm also half Mexican and half Anglo, even though I got the German genes from my dad. And I grew up next to the Grand Canyon with Native Americans. So I am a piece of everybody. And I think that when you're like that, and you see your community hurting or the world hurting in some cases, you're born with empathy for pretty much everybody because you are a piece of everybody. And I think secondly, you look at the gifts that you've been given by whatever the magic algorithm is in the universe that made you who you are and me who I am. And, you know, I feel responsibility. And so I look at the assets that I have, whether it be relationship capital, the ability to get a blank sheet of paper and create something the world's never seen in technology. But at the end of the day, you know, it has become more important for me to, of course, have a profitable business, but not in the sense of making money. It's in the sense of perpetuating that positive impact in the world. And that's what all of my ventures are doing. And if I ever invest in something, that's what I want to find. It's not. I long ago lost the penchant and the undiscipline of seeing a shiny new object called blockchain 5.7, and really started to ask myself, how will this make a profit so that people are happy and can live their life and I can grow? But at the same time, how will this impact the greatest number of people? Because, you know, what the hell else are we here on the planet for? That, to me, money has been replaced by impact in terms of your value in driving change in the world in a positive way. And that's why I only got a little bit of time here to breathe, and I might as well make it count.
And for you, Susan, like what's the driving force that gets you out of bed in the morning? What does it mean to be a purpose-driven entrepreneur for you?
I see so clearly the world that I want to see, and because it makes so much more sense, that it's almost like this cognitive dissonance that you kind of go through, because you know, what do artists, scientists, and entrepreneurs, what do we all have in common? We go by our gut, and we see so clearly what is, but also at the same time overlaid with what could be. And it just makes so much more sense as to what could be. And we have to get so detailed with it and flesh it out in so much detail, step by step, do the high dive to see like that's the goal, but like step by step, reverse engineer, step by step, this is how we get there, so that we can get other people who are way smarter and way more skilled to come on board and help us with it. And then it just becomes really fun because, you know, because when you're principally aligned and that like, yeah, this totally doesn't make sense. This is the way it should be. This is how we help people. You know, I look forward to, they're not meetings. They're just like, it's calling up a friend saying, how do we solve this problem? You know, I was like, you know, last night I was like brushing my teeth and I was thinking this. It's like, yeah, I was thinking that too. And you just kind of get into it. And pretty soon you're on a 2-hour phone call and, you know, you're like both like scribbling away. That's what I live for. I live for the daily bridging of what is, but what what could be and what makes the most sense.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And for you, Brad, I know in our friendship, we've talked a lot about the importance of free speech and how technology can enable that. Like, what is it about free speech, which is, why is that such a fundamental right? And how can technology be used to enable that for people around the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, free speech is the thing that guarantees that the minority idea, the unpopular idea, the idea that maybe is morally right but not politically popular, is able to get into the world and able to proliferate. And, you know, one example I think about is Martin Luther King. And today, everyone loves Martin Luther King. Today, everyone sings his praises and talks about how wonderful he was. In the 60s, he was broadly unpopular. And even at the time that he died, he was broadly unpopular in the United States. And that tells you how important it is to have even these unpopular ideas able to get into the world and proliferate. And I think kind of going back to the COVID piece, it's a lot more critical now even than it was 3 months ago, because so much more of our lives have all of a sudden become digital. And as our lives become more and more digital, if we are not protected, if our information is not private and secure, it means that, you know, I mean, 100 years ago, your government was not able to listen to every conversation that was occurring in their country. Now, it's easy. Every word can be heard. And that completely changes the way that we relate to our governments. It changes our rights, and the whole world just got this supercharge. We're now, the vast majority of conversations are digital, whereas maybe the vast majority of the conversations weren't digital even a few months ago. So now the stakes are so much higher. And I think that, the internet is this, powerful, wonderful tool for communication around the world, but it didn't have privacy and rights to the individual baked into it. And as it's become this global phenomenon, it's now a bit dangerous for us. And I think that's the state that we're in right now. It is actually a danger to us and to our freedoms. And that's the reason why it's so important to change the architecture of it. It's dangerous, and I would say it's getting more dangerous as we go more digital without fixing it.
So I just got the hook saying we have just a few more minutes. So I'd love to, starting with you, Paul, and then we'll go around the group. There's an amazing audience of aspiring entrepreneurs that are watching the video today. If you could leave them with one piece of advice of building and creating during COVID, what would it be?
Well, I mean, God, I have so many scars from the number of successes and challenges I've had along the way. But I think one thing is that if you focus on helping others, whatever you're doing, if it improves somebody else's life in an impact way, then truly anything that is in your head can get reduced to a piece of paper that can become a movement or a piece of technology. And the second thing I would say is a lot of us entrepreneurs have this failure to launch. You'll sit on it forever, hoping and waiting for it to be perfect to launch. And the truth is there's no time like the present to make somebody else's life great.
Thank you, Paul. Susan, give us a closing word, a piece of advice to inspire future entrepreneurs.
Be present, be aware, and solve a problem that's right in front of you. Because if you see it and if you have that problem, there's other people who have that problem. And then figure out a system that you can have a scalable solution for it and continuously solve problems for others. It will come back many timefold. So just saying that, this COVID thing, amazing. It's showing all the rot in the world and that is broken and that can be disintermediated and decentralized by technology, but it still takes people to be able to buy in and participate fully. So be aware and solve problems for each other. What's right in front of you.
Thank you, Susan. And Brad, leave us close us out here. As someone that's created an incredible business, which has grown like gangbusters over the past 2 years, for someone starting from scratch, what should they know and what should they be focusing on?
I think great things are built from great insights. And when you have that great insight, other people won't have that insight and they won't see it. I really love the way that Susan said it earlier with this, vision of the future and all of these, all of this great detail. That's your job. Most of the world will not see it. You're going to need to force it into existence and then they'll see it, but you won't convince them. You'll need to create it. In fact, everyone will tell you it's a bad idea. Your family will tell you it's a bad idea. Your friends will probably tell you it's a bad idea. If everyone's telling you it's a good idea, there's actually probably a problem. So focus on the insight, go with the insight, and go make it happen. And the reality is what's going to convince people, not your words.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Brad. Simon, how do we do on time?
Hi, everybody. It's great to see everyone. What an awesome group of people. A lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces, and talking about some of my favorite topics, some of the most important topics I think we all need to be thinking about right now. So it's my honor to introduce this awesome panel. The topic we have is biohacking your mental health and wellness. And that word biohacking, it can mean different things to different people. And for me, it's really just about how do we make the most of what we've got using the tools that are available to us, whether it's food or sleep or new cool apps and digital tools and technologies, or vitamins and supplements. But I'm curious to hear what my panel thinks. I think mental health is a big focus of this. So I want to introduce the panel. We have an awesome group here today. First, we have Jackie Nechtel. She is a co-founder of the Flow Consciousness Institute, along with Justin Fairman. And then we have Vika Victoria, my neighbor here in Santa Monica. Vika is creator and founder of Stories That Shift, which is a very cool project that she will tell you about. And finally, my good friend Dina Kaplan, who is a leader in the meditation world. She is founder of The Path, which is one of the coolest groups for meditation. And they've been leading some very, very exciting events every Tuesday night that she will tell you about as well. But first off, would love to have you guys go around. And the first topic I was thinking we could talk about is, I think everybody's experiencing the pandemic in their own way and having their own challenges. But I'd be curious, and Jackie and Justin, would love to have you guys kick this off. What's been most surprising for you guys in terms of how people are dealing with mental health and wellness right now?
Yeah, well, one thing that I've noticed, and like you just spoke to, there's so many different perspectives going around on the origins of COVID or how we should be handling it and what we do about masks. Everyone seems to have a difference of opinion for pretty much everything right now. So what I'm really surprised by is a lot of the divisiveness in a lot of the groups and communities that I belong to, and kind of this unwillingness to challenge what we already believe to be true. So, maybe people are just reading titles of articles or aligning with things that already validate and back up what they already believe. And there seems to be a lot of unwillingness to open to other people's perspectives. And for me, that's really surprising, seeing things like, here's what I believe, feel free to unfriend me if you don't agree. Because how do we grow if we're not challenging what we already think we know to be true? And how do we ever come to peace and unity if we are just coming at each other all the time with the assumption that I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad, and not being willing and open to hear another perspective. So there seems to be a lack of critical thinking, a lack of openness to other perspectives, and that just creates an echo chamber. So, what I'd like to see more is discourse and discussion and even healthy debates on these issues rather than just shutting people down because they don't agree with what you believe.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's almost like partisan politics has entered the health space, and now the similar lines are being drawn between like Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, whatever. People are like taking that same frame, but beyond that, I think what's most surprising and interesting, to me, in a space like this, like in terms of biohacking, it's so important to be in touch with what actually creates, health at the most foundational levels. And, I feel like a lot of people have been ignoring that in sake of like obeying, whatever the official guidance is. But it's so important that we stay connected to nature and we get outside and we get fresh air and we get fresh water and we get sunlight on our skin, because these things all are super important for our immune system and our overall health and well-being. So I'm surprised when I hear people say I haven't left my apartment for 3 months. And like on one level, like I applaud the nobility of trying to to do the right thing. But at the same time, it's like so important for us to really get our own needs met. And that's equally as important as, you know, stopping the spread of the virus, is to be healthy ourselves. So I'm a little surprised by how fervently people are doubling down on this quarantine.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Vika, what about you? What's been most surprising to you as you've seen how people are responding right now?
Yeah, I can only speak for my students and my inner circle, but I think what's amazed me is the level of adaptation, how it seems that week over week, with new challenges being brought to the surface, there's really this moment of understanding how little in control we are. And so there's, even for the most high-powered personalities, a process of surrender. And really, it's the first time that I think most of us have had this confrontation of self. We were thrown into the deep end of the ocean of self-awareness, and this process has made those that aren't yet recognize that you've got to be the source of your own joy. You've got to be the source of your own validation. You've got to be the source of your own happiness, because you no longer have the frameworks of going into the office and getting that kind of social support or meeting up with friends for dinner. And so to me, it's been a renaissance of the spirit. And I have seen my students really launch into their inner child and their creative spirit and tap into flow state by doing the things that brought them joy when they were a kid that they never had time to do before. And now, instead of just once in a while, it's a daily practice. And so in a lot of ways, what surprises me about COVID is it's helping us reconnect to all of the excuses and all the parts of us that we've let die over years and years of being on this hamster wheel.
Great, thank you, Vika. All right, Dina, how about you? What's been most surprising to you?
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to answer. I first want to just give you a huge shout out. So thank you for being such a good friend and taking on this moderating role. And I have to say that I love Justin and Jackie. They were actually on our meditation and chat last night. It's so great to see you guys again. And Vika, who was on about a month ago. So this is an incredible community and group of people, and it's an honor and truly a treat and a pleasure to be here with everyone. So hi. So I would say that I would maybe echo the beginning of what Jackie was saying, which is that I'm seeing a lot of extremes. And I know she was talking about people burrowing into their position, which might be, I need to wear a mask and wear gloves. And even as places are opening up, we're seeing cases rise. So I'm going to stay inside, and a lot of judgment on the people that just say, I need to get out. And then the people that are ready to go out, are having a lot of judgment of the people that are wearing masks and sometimes sneering at them, or even worse. So what I'm seeing in terms of extremes that has surprised me is that people are being open, that have been hit really hard by what's happened, especially since it's been a while since this COVID and quarantine thing has hit us. People saying, I feel lonely. It's a very courageous and vulnerable thing to say. And people that I never thought would say that, your kind of cool kids and your circle of friends, they're saying that. I had a friend say, I feel unhugged. I thought, wow, that's vulnerable, that's courageous, it's brave, and it's true. And when people are feeling that, I think you go one of two ways. And so this is what I've really seen. I run a company in meditation called The Path, and people often ask me, who's your biggest competitor? And I think they are expecting me to say another maybe company or community in meditation. And I say the bar. They're like, what? And I'm like, I think at a time of crisis, people are drawn to alcohol or maybe things that might be negative for them, or they're really drawn to spirituality and wellness. So I've definitely seen people focus on the negative and everything that they don't have, focusing on the lack. But I've also seen a lot of people who I would never expect, like one of my best friends who's the chair of a science department at MIT, who's never been interested in health or wellness or anything like that. I mean, she's an academic and publishing papers and books all the time. And she reached out to say, I need more I need something else in my life. And so I have put her on a path of meditation. She's actually seeing a psychic also. I'm not sure I want to put those in the same bucket. But I thought that was really interesting. And so people young and old, very hardcore people in the sciences, academics, people you would just not expect to necessarily go down pretty far on the spirituality route are doing so. And so they're looking at not just meditation, but other ways to just find something else to give them some support, and find actually what Vigo was talking about, find that sense of self and that happiness coming from within. So we've seen the good. I've seen the good and the bad. I've been surprised by the intensity of both.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dina. And yeah, I just want to echo what some of you guys said just about how, even though on one hand, there are a lot of messages we're getting in terms of public health, in terms of isolating ourselves and avoiding the virus, I think, you know, you can look at it on the other side in terms of we still need access to nature, we still need sunlight for vitamin D, for mental health. And I think it's important to have these conversations and to provide these opportunities for people to connect with themselves and with nature and with other people in ways that are healthy and safe. And I'm grateful to all you guys for your leadership in that type of work. Would love to ask you guys, Justin and Jackie, a little bit about what you guys are working on with the Flow Consciousness Institute, which I've heard a little bit about, but I honestly am curious because I don't know too much about it exactly. Would love to hear about what you guys are focused on and what people should know about this practice.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different things that we do in a lot of different areas that our work covers, but you could kind of all put it under the central umbrella of really helping people to thrive, to equipping them with the tools and the practices and the understandings that they need to thrive in any situation that life could possibly serve up to them, whether it's the coronavirus or just business as usual, and really developing what we call a new operating system for the mind and how we view and approach the world and life that allows us to experience success, living our passions, living our purpose, having deep social impact, and really living up to our full potential.
Yeah, and I think how it serves at this time is so much of what we do is helping people thrive in uncertainty. And I think, you know, people bought into this illusion of certainty pre-COVID, but the only certainty is that there's going to be uncertainty. So really having skills and frameworks and tools to support you in dealing with limiting beliefs, emotional patterns, things that keep people stuck in the struggle and suffering, and teaching them to really let go of control and surrender and learn to trust life, to trust themselves, really is everything in times like this.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think as challenging as this time is for a lot of people, I think if people are able to come away from this being more comfortable being alone and being more comfortable with ambiguity and with uncertainty, I think that's one essential life skill that we all need to develop sooner or later. And maybe some people are being forced to deal with it now. Question for all you guys, maybe now we can start with Vika and then Dina. What's been the biggest challenge for you personally these last few months when it comes to managing stress and anxiety and staying focused and being productive? I mean, there's just so much going on around us. It can be a little overwhelming. I would love to know what's been effective for you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So my career is indefinitely on pause, and that shock was really brutal. I had planned a speaking engagement with Microsoft. I had a European speaking tour, and all of that canceled overnight. And so I found myself in this place of deep anxiety, both from a financial perspective, but also from knowing that the way that I feel most alive is when I'm on stage and invigorated by hundreds of people. And so for me, it was taking time to be okay with that transition. And one of the things that really helped, honestly, was fostering a kitten, because I live alone and I don't have roommates and my family is far away. And so just having something to love and to be playful with, and that oxytocin release happening every day, multiple times a day, was really a clever hack that I didn't expect. The other thing that helped me manage stress was to create ceremony when I walked into my work day and when I walked out of my work day. There were clear demarcations. And I created a system I call 333. So it's on a sheet of paper, there's 9 lines. So it's 3 things you gotta do in the first hour you wake up, 3 things you do by lunch, and 3 things you do by end of day. And I would fill this in the night before. And that way, any stress or anxiety that I felt by this really large to-do list kind of dissipated. So getting more organized with my time and getting more visibility helped. The other thing that helped was incorporating the arts. So every night in my transition from work to play, I would just paint. I'd be on the phone with a friend and I would do something that was actually expressive and not touching the computer. I would also start bike riding at sunset, and that was really lovely because it gave me such gratitude for the thing that I never got to experience because I was always traveling, which is sunset at the ocean. So finding that substitute, whenever there was a pain or a stress point, how can I replace it with a joy, a discovery, and a gratitude?
Awesome. Thank you, Vika. Dina, what about you? What's been your biggest challenge personally, and how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Vika, I loved your answer. Thank you. It's really inspiring, as you always are. So thank you for that. Wow, you are making a question that's hard to avoid. So I guess we have to be honest with this one, right? My biggest struggle by far, that, to be honest, I continue to struggle with is focus. So I've actually been surprised. I'm like the extrovert's extrovert, as any of you who know me, but the minute the quarantine started, I actually felt great. There's nothing to miss, right? There's no FOMO these days. So I felt really happy to just go within and do my own thing. But I found myself drawn to 2 things. One, I was drawn to things that were really fun and playful for me, but not on an organized schedule like Vika. So I might sit down to think, oh, I'm going to start writing, right? That's productive and that's what I want to do, but think, oh no, I deserve to go for a walk. I deserve that, right? These are tough times. I deserve to go for a hike. Maybe I'll make paleo pancakes that Justin and I were joking about the other day. There's still all these fun things that we can do, right? And so that was my way of treating myself with everything going on. I was just finding constant, endless distractions. And then the other thing I found was this instinct to be reactive. And I run a community. I run the Path community. I also run a community around a beautiful retreat that we host called Mela. And I was fielding, I can't even tell you, hundreds and hundreds of emails from people every week asking for help with this, help with that. The attorneys want help finding new clients, and the coaches want help finding new clients, and other people are struggling with their meditation practice and this and that. So my email was full. And I could spend the whole day just responding to everyone. Oh, let me help you with that. I can help you with that. But at the end of every single day, and then the end of a week, and then the end of a month, I just wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. So what I ended up doing, I could put into 4 buckets. One, actually, you helped inspire this, Daniel. I got an app to turn off other apps. So I have an app on my phone that at 9 o'clock will turn off Instagram and a bunch of other apps. Even last night, I'm not going to lie, I had to turn off Chrome, so I cannot access the web from my phone at certain times, and certainly at night. So that was great. 2, I set a pretty hardcore morning routine. I'm not sure it's as good as Vika's. Maybe it is. So I get up, I floss, which is, by the way, the most genius thing ever, because that's that thing you never want to do. And you do that and you think, how awesome am I? I flossed. What could go wrong with the day? Floss, go for a short run, a little bit of yoga, and then I meditate for either half an hour or an hour. Don't worry, the run is really short, like 5 minutes, yoga, 10 minutes. And then do the meditation. So that's another way to say, okay, I'm in control. I'm in control of my time. I'm in control of my schedule. I'm in control of me. So that felt really good. Third thing is to set up weekly rituals, because it's very easy for even now these weeks to just blend into each other. So I was joking with Justin the other day that I started doing a paleo banana pancake ritual with my friend I was quarantining with for the first few months of this quarantine on Sunday morning. So we would make those pancakes and then we'd listen to the Commodores, easy like a Sunday morning. It's really hard to be in a bad mood after listening to that. It was just a beautiful thing that marked that day as different than all the other days. And I think we both would look forward to it all week. So I really recommend setting rituals, whatever they are. And then the fourth thing was to allow myself at least one fun, happy thing a day. For me, that's dancing. I love it. It's probably my form of art, if that counts, Vika. So I would play the Glee version of Call Me Maybe. It's probably the worst song of all time, but I'm not gonna lie, I love it. Full on dance, not like a little dance, but like full on dancing, standing up, grooving to it. It's only 2 minutes long, but that would leave me feeling really happy, empowered, playful, fun. And it's another way to say, this is my day. I'm going to choose my emotions for it. I'm going to make it a great day. And then I could go on and be productive and be more thoughtful about how I was spending my time for the rest of the day.
Thanks, Dina. I feel like we all need to see that video of you singing and dancing to Call Me Maybe. I feel like that could be the next big viral TikTok hit.
It might be on
the Awesome. What about you, Justin and Jackie? What's been the biggest challenge for you guys personally, and how have you guys responded?
Yeah, well, Dina, you are a little ray of sunshine, so I think you could have been the antidote for anxiety. For me, the thing that created the most anxiety was just not knowing what to believe. So early on when COVID hit and just reading obsessively all of these different articles and trying to figure out what was true and make sense of everything and going down some crazy rabbit holes and, you know, going to bed later as a result of that, it was impacting my sleep, how I was able to focus and show up the next day. So really just turning off the news, limiting social media time, and really just keeping in my locus of control what I need to know in order to keep myself well and healthy and the people around me well and healthy. And then, you know, limiting anything else that wasn't essential to, you know, having that knowledge was really helpful. And I think for me, there's three things that really supported me in this time and support me always. The first, probably being the most important, is showing up from a place of service and supporting others where I can. And that to me is really the antidote to anxiety and connects me to something that's greater than me, that's a purpose that's bigger than me. So wherever I can, be of support and service to others. And, you know, service and purpose can sometimes seem like such big things, but it could be as simple as just calling someone you love and checking on them, or going in and getting groceries for someone who is more at risk or something like that. So it doesn't have to be some big grandiose thing, but using our capacity and our skill set to show up and serve others and support others in the ways that we can, but also important from a place of overflow. You can't give what you don't have. So really putting your self-care as a main priority and giving from the overflow. So that gratitude, really just having a gratitude practice and finding all of the things that I have to be appreciative and grateful for, shifts me out of fear and anxiety. And last being nature, just spending time in nature. It's so expansive and just it takes all of the stress away for me, just watching the waves or listening to the birds. And it's so simple, so accessible, you know, for most people, unless you're in New York City or somewhere. But just finding space to just sit and be still is so effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to myself how lucky we are to live here in Southern California, at least most of the panelists here. I don't know where everyone else is calling in from, but just having access to nature and a place to just connect with the earth and be near trees or parks, it's huge right now, I think. So I'm very grateful for that. All right, last question. We only have 5 minutes left, so let's try to make this one quick. But silver linings, what can we take away from the situation that's positive? When you think about the lasting legacy of this time that we're going through, do you guys see any silver linings? And why don't we start with Dina this time and do Dina and then Vika and then Justin and Jackie. Any silver linings to this pandemic for people when it comes to adopting healthier behaviors related to mind and body?
Yeah, I've definitely seen this. I mean, I've seen the negative side, right, of people turning towards substances that might not be so helpful for them. But I've seen a lot of people that I would never expect to turn towards wellness. Literally, the people in my life that I would never even talk to about meditation have proactively reached out to say, I want to start. How can I start? And we actually have a member of our community that comes to all of the Tuesday meditations that we do, who's never been into any of this stuff. And he is meditating every day now. He started therapy and he's doing some other modality. I don't know whether it's Reiki or something else. And he is just full on wellness. So I think if people have had any inclination towards exploring the other, the mystery in life, the spiritual side of things, this pandemic is making that really attractive to them. And I think that will stay. So that to me is really, really, really exciting and really wonderful.
Great. Vika?
Yeah, I think the reckoning of our own mortality puts us in a state of reevaluation, which allows us to re-examine the things that actually matter. I think the silver linings that I've seen are people recognizing the importance of their roots, of their family, and understanding what true quality time looks like versus how they used to spend time. And so I don't think there's any going back from this. I think the relationships that have been deepened and forged during this pandemic will serve people moving forward. And I think all of us have understood like who are our core friends, because those are the friends that are constantly checking in on us. So if anything, it's given us all a sense of deeper humanity and a desire to show up in service for each other.
Beautiful. What about you guys? Justin, Jackie, I'll let you have the last word here.
Well, I would kind of carry on from what Vika said. I think that I've been pleasantly surprised by how much people showed up for each other. And, you know, suddenly your neighbors become really important, the neighbors that you never knew, you know, are suddenly your closest friends and family. So I think that's really beautiful. I think it's really, you know, inspired people to come together in a lot of ways and really place a higher value on that human face-to-face connection now that it's suddenly truly gone. It's not just we choose an app, you know, over seeing each other in person. Now it's been disconnected big time. So I think that the pendulum's going to swing back the other way, and we're going to come together in new ways at new levels of depth. And then also too, and this is a kind of above and beyond biohacking, but, you know, before this all happened, you know, climate change and global warming and, you know, potentially systemic collapse was the elephant in the room. And, you know, despite all of the conferences we had, you know, the best we could do was say, well, maybe in 2050 or something, we'll stop using all these fossil fuels and we'll change our ways, hopefully by 2050. And then in the course of 2 weeks, we did it. We literally changed almost all the bad habits that we had and just completely paused everything in 2 weeks. And so I think that presents the fact that we can actually change at a global level in a coordinated way much faster than people had, you know, assumed it could be done. And that it just took something big enough to really catalyze that coherence and that you know, unity around a common purpose. And so, so I'm excited for what that portends about what we can do in the future. That, hey, if we just get together and agree on some common goal, that we can actually change our behavior really quickly. And whenever COVID passes, whenever this thing passes, our larger existential crises can be dealt with in a really much more effortless way.
Great. I think that's a beautiful note to close out on, a very hopeful, positive, uplifting note. I think we're at the end of our time, but I just want to thank our panel. You guys have all been amazing. I think we've all learned something. We've all been inspired. I just wanted to drop a little bit about what I'm working on. I dropped a note in the chat to Vitamin Z, which is my newsletter where I cover trends in health and wellness. So I'd encourage you guys to take a look at that because that's been a fun project for me in these past few weeks. And yeah, I just want to thank Simon for organizing this. Simon, man, you have a knack for bringing together top quality people and creating inspiring experiences, and this one is no different. So thank you again, Simon.